The last dungeon has been cleared. Someone screams, the dungeon is collapsing. Everything around shines with a bright light from the wasted battle with monsters. The knights rush to run and someone shouted, they need to go faster to the exit, they must not stop, otherwise they will be finished. The monsters shouted that they needed to be killed, death to aliens from another world. They destroyed their hideout. While the knights were running towards the exit, one of them realized that this was a curse. There were too many of these monsters, they were catching up. Suddenly there was a bright flash of light. The knight stopped and told the others to move on, which made them very wary. The other knight was very scared for him and shouted, Siomunyo, what is he doing? With a smile on his face, he said, whoever of them survives, he instructs him to write his biography. People didn't realize that they weren't the only ones. In the middle of a crowded street, one guy accidentally bumped another with his shoulder and he asked the question, idiot, he should watch where he's going. But when this guy spoke out and looked into the face of his opponent, he became very wary and dumbfounded. It turned out that he saw the face of a monster under a deep hood. People are not the only ones who built their civilization on Earth. The monster smiled in his face. These are demons, people living underground, an entire civilization, completely different from what was built by people on the surface of the Earth. Suddenly, a huge magical hand appeared among the crowd of people. Everything around shone with a bright light. A lot of dust appeared and people began to scream from fear and horror. A huge monster appeared among this dust. Due to a sudden invasion by demons, humanity was on the verge of complete destruction. Humanity launched a counterattack. But no weapons affected the demons. They possessed magic that made it possible to defeat any attack. However, the situation soon changed. The magic that demons possessed began to inexplicably appear in humans, and those few who were gifted changed and became superhumans, possessors of human abilities. Having found new forces of resistance, humanity fought back against the underground civilization of demons. One by one, superhumans cleared out the demon dungeon, and a glimmer of hope appeared for humanity. And finally, the last dungeon, the gate. In the spring of 2005, the 7 strongest among superhumans gathered. They cleared the last dungeon, the main logo of the demons, and put an end to the long war. And because of the salvation of mankind, they were called the 7 saviors. They gained great wealth and fame, but one of them did not return from the battlefield. The grand opening of the monument to the hero Siomunyob took place. The leader of the 7 saviors, Siomunyob, was the only one who did not live to enjoy the rewards that were showered upon the others. The survivors became celebrities, and the fallen hero became a legend. So 17 years passed. Match A, an international competition between South Korea and France, took place at the State Arena in Seoul. The commentator shouted, their players are in trouble. The French team is attacking, but they haven't been hit yet. Nathan Bernard. Player Nathan Bernard destroys their team members to smithereens. He holds the outstretched weapon in his hand and lands on the ground with ease and dexterity. 6 kills. He took all 6 kills single-handedly. Have you ever seen such a player in the International Combat League? Some guy looked at everything that was happening through the screen and said with displeasure, how terrible. One of the commentators began to say, he risks becoming one of the 3 best players in all history. The other spoke, looking him in the face, their team was incapacitated very quickly. Only Baek Hye-young remains. There is little hope of victory. But before he had time to finish, something unexpected happened and the player Hye-young went on the offensive. Her weapon of choice is this and she will strike Nathan. She approached him, her hand glowed with a bright red light. But suddenly he looked into the distance without even turning to look at her. She got even closer. The people around her were dumbfounded with surprise. Everyone opened their mouths from such stunnedness and waited for the outcome of events. A bright spark appeared in the girl's hands, but suddenly she stopped and something alerted her. She is, after all, the daughter of one of the 7 saviors. But with such a team, she can't defeat him. Nathan abruptly walked past her and she was engulfed by his incredible abilities and glowed with blue light, gradually becoming transparent. The commentator announced that Baek Hye-young had already been killed. The South Korean team lost miserably. The entire team was not enough to fight back Nathan. In the second round, Bernard took 7 players, and the match between the teams of South Korea and France ends with a devastating 0-11. What a disappointment. When in Korea there were many talented superhumans, they destroyed the Dungeon of Demons during the Great War. But now their athletes are not the same. These words were spoken by head coach Baek Hye-ho, and he continued to say what a shame it is for the nation that produced 2 of the 7 saviors of mankind, Siomunyob and Baek Hye-ho. So, the match ended with a victory for France. The French are good, but the match was very sad for them. Jaho said with a sad look that he was sure that things were not easy for their people now. In the chat comments people wrote, who will be responsible for this? Are they really the right country? This question has been asked many times. Is this really the country where Siomunyob and Baek Hye-ho were born? This is very sad. Someone punched their face because of facepalm and remembers how their government said that there is too much violence in esports beyond people and it needs to be closed. So that's what it is. What kind of competitions can there be if there are really no sports athletes in the country? Most of their players are at the bottom. It's not just about France losing now, you need to put their people against any team and they will be taken out. Maybe it would be better if the head coach was a player. Young is the only real athlete on the team, she needs to leave. People started shouting various humiliating phrases at them with angry expressions on their faces. How could they be so disgraced at an international match? We need to replace them all. Young is the only normal player. They also paid to see how they were disgraced. Ho, after a while, he walked out of the room alone. There were several capsules in front of him, and he wondered what a failure it was. He reflects on the fact that this is the third time they have lost since he became head coach of the national team. The players in the capsules began to remove their helmets, and the system reported that the module was disabled and the broadcast was interrupted. The guys with sad faces looked at the floor, and he continued to think, everything is as people said. Young is the only normal player, the rest are absolutely no match. They used to say about Korean superhumans that they were strong and resilient, but now that's a thing of the past. Their mental strength and skills are just rock bottom. Everyone who wants something and knows how to do it has long since gone abroad or died. He grabbed the handle of the door to the trainer's room and went inside, after which he took a deep breath, walked up to the wall, stopped, looked up, and mentally greeted Munyob. He was sorry that he was not with them. He looked at the photo of them together where he was smiling. He focused his attention on this and straightened his tie, but suddenly someone knocked on the door. A guy came into his coaching room and told him that everything was ready for the interview. He asks him to go because they are already waiting for him there. He took another deep breath and thought, closing his eyes, yes, he needs to apologize to the people. He tapped the guy on the shoulder and asked, that's why he was made the head coach, right? He clenched his teeth in embarrassment and said, Coach. Ho answered him, things are terrible. The guy turned sharply to him and asked again in bewilderment, what? What is he talking about? He replied that they could not compete with anyone in such a lineup. They were weak physically and mentally. The guy shouted back at him, but he had just taken over as head coach. He's just started. Ho answered him with complete seriousness, no, he will have to announce his retirement in this interview. The guy was very upset and said to him in a trembling voice, head coach. But he walked past him and, without turning around, spread his arms and said that he could achieve something only if a miracle suddenly happened and Seo Munyob returned from the other world. He'd rather quit than let this team drag his reputation into the mud. The guy shouted to him with the last hope, without him they don't have a single chance. Ho stopped and thought, this is his chance, he will finally quit. Suddenly the guy told him that he needed to go to the wrong place. He looked at him questioningly and at that moment the president of the association called on his phone. He looked at the phone screen with bewilderment and wondered why he was calling. Rubbing salt in the wound, he answered the call and the president of the association asked him a question. Did he read the news? He realized with a thoughtful look, of course, and then asked the question, are we talking about how the head coach humiliated the entire country at an international competition? Yes, he was actually present. The president of the association yelled at him and told him that was not what he was talking about. Jeho asked him in bewilderment, what was he talking about? Suddenly his expression changed and fear was visible on his face. He asked him again in horror, what did he say? Meanwhile, there was a bright flash of light in the sky, from which a person appeared and began to fall to the ground right in the center of the city next to the Seo Munyob monument. All the people expressed bewilderment on their faces when they heard that crash from the landing and saw the dust. It was Gwanghwamun, 3 monuments. People started screaming, someone fell from the sky. He's wearing armor. Admiral Lee Sunsin, Great Emperor Sejong. And another hero who saved 6 heroes 17 years ago. He sacrificed himself. This is Seo Munyob. People immediately surrounded him with their appearance and began filming what was happening on their phones. Seo Munyob had a bloody face and armor. He was in no hurry to get up, and people kept shouting, is this Seo Munyob? It is he. Meanwhile, the president of the association, who was talking with Ho, asked him if he had gone deaf. Did he even understand what he said? Seo Munyob was still next to the monument built in his honor. He opened his glowing eyes and heard people shout, Seo Munyob has returned from the other world. Suddenly everything lit up with a bright magical light. Several demons formed around Seo Munyob, and bloody spots also filled the entire area. He looked at the demon behind him with fear and clenched his teeth in anger, after which he turned around sharply and saw many demons approaching him from the other side. He straightened his hand and caught the magic rod. His eyes glowed with a bright color. He looked at the terrifying monsters in front of him and saw the gate to the dungeon. It was finally sealed. He was in front of many brightly glowing and terrifying monsters and said, well. After these words, everything lit up bright orange. He found himself surrounded by these creatures. His eyes continued to glow with magical light and he asked himself the question, now he will fight to the end. Suddenly something alarmed him and he screamed loudly, after which he jumped out of bed and tried to catch his breath. He ended up in the hospital with system devices attached to his arm. A nurse approached him and said with a surprised expression on her face, "Dear, he's already woken up." He grabbed his head and asked with complete seriousness on his face, "Where is he?" The nurse asked him how he was feeling. "He is in the hospital." He asked her again in bewilderment. What did she say? He looked at the calendar and realized with incredible horror that it was not 2005, but 2022. He was horrified and wondered, but how could this be? He remembers exactly that when he descended into the last dungeon, it was 2005. The nurse with a smile on her face told him that she understood everything. He was surprised, but she thought that she needed to explain something to him about their time, but she came up with it. She pressed the remote control and turned on the TV that was located in front of Seo Munyob's bed, then pointed her hand at the screen and asked him to look at it for himself. Meanwhile, an interview with Yeho was taking place on the screen. The journalist reported that the transition to the news began. Seo Munyob was taken to the hospital. He is the leader of the Seven Saviors, who was considered dead for 17 years. Suddenly he returned and is currently being treated in a medical facility. After eyewitnesses from Gwanghwamun Square, Seo Munyob fell from the sky and landed right at the foot of his statue. He is still unconscious, but according to doctors his life is not in danger. He received only minor injuries. Eyewitnesses report that Seo Munyon was wearing the same armor that he was wearing when he was last seen, when he descended into the demon dungeon in 2005. And despite the fact that he is a Superman, his appearance has not changed a bit in 17 years. Some experts have suggested that this may be a phenomenon of a space-time anomaly. That's all for today. Seo Munyob was beside himself with horror and scratched his head and wondered if 17 years had really passed. For him, 2005 was just yesterday. The nurse opened her mouth in surprise and said, pointing her finger at the TV, "It's true, that's why this outrage is happening outside the window." He looked out the window and saw a crowd of people standing in the parking lot, and the nurse continued to say, "The journalist is now on duty around the clock, waiting for him, Seo Munyob." Many journalists gathered under the window of a medical facility, each with communication means, various phones, cameras, and microphones at the ready. Seo Munyob said with irritation, 17 years have passed, and these freaks are still the same as before. He asked the nurse to give him a mirror, which led her to ask him, "A mirror. Let him wait and she will bring it." After some time, she handed him a round mirror and asked if this would be suitable. He looked at his reflection and thought with fear, he really hadn't changed. There is no way he looks so young at 47 years old. Has there really been a space-time anomaly? But this is impossible. He had never heard of an anomaly that lasted for 17 years. But if this is truly the world of the future, 17 years later, then stop. Suddenly he asked his nurse in a trembling voice, "Does she by any chance know what is happening with his money?" She said with a stunned look, "In general, this was all done as he indicated in the will. Everything was given to the fund for supporting orphans. One day he donated his entire fortune, and at that moment he realized the gravity of his situation. After that, he asked the question, what was happening to his house? She replied that because it was the house of a famous hero, they turned it into a museum. What about his car? She replied that the car was sold at a charity auction. He opened his mouth in bewilderment, clenched his fists and said, in other words, he is not only a beggar, but also a homeless person. The medical worker took a deep breath, sympathizing with him. He bowed his head and said what kind of curse this is. If he had known that this would happen, he would have saved at least some amount. The girl grinned, suddenly stood up and asked him not to worry so much. He was a hero who saved humanity. Does he really think that he will be left in the lurch? Moreover, Biki Hoshi called them as soon as he found out about his arrival. She will call him back and ask when he will arrive. After some time, she entered his room and reported that he had said that he would arrive soon. Seo Munyob replied that he understood. The nurse also said that she needed to leave for a while, but if he needed anything, he should please press the call button. She slammed the door and he silently turned towards the window and thought, he sees that he himself is in the future, but still cannot believe it. He will need to ask Yeho about everything that is happening. For now he will check the condition of his body. Analyzing look. A system window appeared in front of him, which reports, with an analyzing glance, the ability to visualize and analyze the abilities and talents of living beings. Only Caster can see the result. This ability made him the strongest among the super people of the world. This view analyzes the data and abilities of an object not only in the present, but also its potential in the future. Thanks to this, he developed many times faster than those around him. In internet articles they wrote about him that he was a dungeon robber. He burst through like a meteor. Another success. The youngest leader, Seo Munyob, has cleared the secret dungeon, and very soon he became the leader of a dungeon clearing group, and also, one day someone asked him to teach him his skills. He scratched the back of his head in bewilderment and looked at Yeho, who asked him about it. And even he, who later became one of the 7 rescuers. He looked at Baek Yi-ho with his analyzing ability and saw that he had high potential and thought, okay. And he thought that he was just a loser, but it turned out that he had very high potential. And at that moment he decided to take him as his student. Only if he played the box during his studies, it was not his problem. Jeho asked him back in surprise, right. He understood. He will do anything to stay alive. He was raised using his abilities. Strength 79, agility 97, speed 76, everything is exactly as it was. Suddenly he looked in bewilderment at the strength of the fire and saw 110 out of 100. But 100 is the limit of growth for a person. And it is written that he has 110, and there is also superpower here, which did not exist before. Superpower is called immortality, immunity to death from physical impact. He looked at it questioningly and wondered what. Did he have such a cool ability before? Maybe superpowers can be given in special circumstances. Was it really this superpower that was given to him for that battle? Well then, but before he had time to think this thought through, someone called him loudly, shouting, Munyob. He turned questioningly towards the door and saw Yi-ho running there, who stopped and opened his mouth in surprise. Seo Munyob told him, Yi-ho, is this him? Tears appeared in his eyes and he could not believe that Munyob was back. He smiled at him and spoke, and he seemed to become a sentimental person. Yi-ho wiped his tears and smiled at him with the words, after all, peacetime has come. After some time, night fell, the city lit up with different colors. The guys went out onto the roof with hot drinks in their hands. They looked at the beautiful view and talked. Seo Munyob said to Yi-ho with a smile on his face, he hopes that he has already finished crying. Yi-ho smiled and spoke back, he has yet to find out. The older he gets, the more tears appear. Seo Munyob said, well, how could he know? He's young. After that, he asked him a question, so did he keep his promise? Jeho asked him again, which one? He replied, his biography, man. Jeho smiled and replied, that's what he's talking about. He hired a ghostwriter, a famous fantasy novelist. Seo Munyob is the savior of humanity. Seo Munyob grinned and asked, where does it start? From his birth. He replied, they also made a documentary and a feature film. Everything there looks like it's mythology. The content is so-so, but it was very popular. The movie even became a blockbuster all over the world. Seo Munyob looked at him silently and asked a question after a moment, what should he do now? He thought he died, but woke up in the hospital. 17 years have passed. A world around him is completely unfamiliar to him. Smartphones, for example, are really something. In his mind he knows that he is in the future, but it is very difficult for him to believe it. And even if he is the savior of humanity, in reality he is just a homeless person. Jeho silently looked at him, after which he touched his shoulder and said with a smile on his face that he has a friend. If he needs money, then he can only say so. Seo Munyob grinned and said, and he really got older, Yi-ho. He probably already has a lot of money by now. What did he do? Business. He replied that he had good savings from raids and a state bonus that was given after the Great War, so he did something with his money. Yes, it was better to increase it rather than waste it. Seo Munyob told him, it's strange, even if he is rich, how could his business not fall apart if his head is such a fool? Jeho said that he was ashamed to admit it, but he also entrusted the running of his business to a professional. Seo Munyob replied that everything is clear to him, so he is also unemployed. Yi-ho told him with shame, no, he has work to do. Seo Munyob asked him which one. He replied that he works as a head coach. He is the head coach of the national team. Seo Munyob asked him what he was muttering so quietly and about what other national team. He pressed some buttons on his phone and asked him to wait, after which he handed him a video of the final of the European Esports Championship and asked him to watch it. He picked up the phone and asked the question, what is it? Suddenly he saw a video of people fighting among themselves. This alarmed him and he asked the question, what is it? This is the same dungeon that they defended at one time, hasn't it been destroyed? He replied, this is an esports called the Battle of Superhumans. Seo Munyob asked him in bewilderment, a battle of superhumans. Yi-ho replied, the scene is virtual reality, a dungeon, there is a battle between two teams. This is such a sport, it's a kind of business. People use their skills that are no longer needed in reality. This sport has always been popular and now interest in it has surpassed any other. He looked at the video more carefully and said, in his opinion, this is just childish. Jeho answered him, remembering all the serious heroes, that this is not true at all. High-class players are almost comparable to the Seven Saviors, and their achievements in sports are a source of national pride. He grabbed the straw in his mouth and said, okay, so where are their players? Jeho asked with a frightened expression on his face, what? Seo Munyob opened the lid of his coffee, turned sharply to him and asked, is he already so old that he can't hear well? Where is South Korea? They have a small population, but they had many strong superhumans. He is sure that in this game for children they are certainly not the last. He decided to throw a glass of coffee into the trash from afar while Yi-ho hesitated with his answer, after which he said at his own peril and risk, actually, South Korea is the very last. Seo Munyob did not end up in the trash bin and was dumbfounded after hearing the words. He silently turned to him and looking at him in surprise, in a trembling voice asked the question, what did he say? After some time, they got into the car and Yeho continued to tell him while driving, when a great evil is overthrown, the one who overthrew it himself becomes evil. Seo Munyob with a dissatisfied expression on his face asked him what he was saying. Yeho continued to talk about why their country is the weakest in this sport. Seo Munyob asked him again, did he even understand what he said? Jeho replied, after the war, the authorities began to see superhumans as a threat. There were no more demons to fight with which they were needed. The authorities feared that their swords would turn against them. Seo Munyob looked away with a malicious look to the side and spoke after some silence, and these people remained the same as they were. Jeho continued, the superhuman battle game was tightly controlled, under the pretext that superhumans were too destructive. Yeho is no exception. He replied that he had noticed this before. Even in his time, all the strongest Korean superhumans simply went to other countries and became players or coaches. Yeho replied with a smile on his face, yes, that's true. Seo Munyob continued talking. He remembers people who hovered around them like buzzards, wanting to use them in one way or another. He should have broken their kneecaps back then. Jeho spoke with caution, but he was slinging mud at both the president and politicians very seriously. He replied that it was because he was angry at their overt attempts to use him for their own purposes. He generally reacted half-heartedly. Jeho continued, well, because their wings were clipped from the beginning, the average level of superhuman players is very low. He turned to him with a smile on his face, but Seo Munyob immediately told him that he would never do that. Yeho shouted at him, but he didn't even say anything yet. He replied that he knew him, he wanted to get him involved in their sport. Jeho asked him again, what's wrong? Munyob, already only 30, is at the peak of his powers. Does he really want to waste his life? Seo Munyob answered him with irritation, he doesn't burn through anything. He shouldn't get involved in this. He doesn't want to live like a Superman anymore. His superhuman life ended there in the last dungeon. Yeho replied, but everything is much simpler now, no debt and pressure, it's just sport. Seo Munyob asked him again, no debt. He shouldn't make him laugh. Does he look like a man who would fight for others? Yeho looked at him silently and didn't answer, and Seo Munyob continued to talk. When he was little, he fought for survival and for respect in the place where he was raised after discovering superpowers. The time has come for him to live for himself, doesn't he think so? Even if he went into sports, the journalists would no longer give him a pass. The savior of the world Seo Munyob will now save Korea and other similar nonsense. They will raise the hopes of the people to the skies and will follow his every step. Jeho asked him again, but doesn't the thought of battle already make his blood pump? He replied with a smile on his face, no, he was tired of being a clown. Yeho looked away and said, okay, then they will leave it. Seo Munyob looked out the window thoughtfully and said, but still, Korean superhumans are not such losers. Yeho asked him what he was talking about. He pointed his finger towards the billboard with a picture of a girl on it and said, since they have superhumans like her, such a girl, he should look at her eyes, she is very beautiful. Jeho answered him, actually this is his daughter, Munyob. Seo Munyob was very surprised by what was happening and spoke with a trembling voice, but Hae-young was 6 years old. Yeho replied, it was 17 years ago and now she is 23 years old. Seo Munyob smiled and asked, what is he saying? She was always beautiful, but now she has become even more beautiful. Yeho asked him to shut up and he apologized to him. After some time, they arrived at Yeho's house. They were greeted by his wife with incredible delight and said, wow, Munyob, it's him. The woman's name is Han Sun-hee, 52 years old, superhuman. How long has it been since she saw him? Seo Munyob replied, well, yes, but he only had it for a week. She smiled and joked about how she had aged in just a week. He said in response to her, what is she saying? To him she looks like only a week has passed. She laughed and said, Munyob, he remained the same as he always was, after which she turned to her husband and said, dear, he was really good for taking the time and bringing him. He rubbed the back of his head and replied, his friend, who had been presumed dead for so many years, had returned to him. It was the least he could do. Munyob looked at the married couple and realized that now he believes that all this is happening for real. He really returned to life in a peaceful future without the struggle for survival and wars. But what should he do here? He could have played. He opened a pack of chips, pressed the button on the TV remote control, lay down on the sofa and wondered what was going on in the box. Suddenly he saw something unusual and realized, this is a stairway to heaven, so is this a repeat of that same drama? Wow, he never knew how it ended. His whole body shook and he said, yes, that's right, this is fate, this is why he returned to this sinful earth. He was delighted and shouted, he stocked up on chips, he will watch this series all day until the very end. At that moment, Yeho passed by and looked at him in bewilderment. He continued to scream, and for that matter, rewatch all the dramas from 2005 to this day. Jeho was horrified by the thought and asked him again, all the dramas since 2005. He suddenly ran up to him and shouted, "Munyob, is he really going to watch dramas for days?" Munyob answered him with indifference, even despite him, yes. He leaned closer to him and Munyob said, "He just arrived at his house. He said he would leave the topic of sports for now, so what's going wrong?" Jeho answered him with a frightened look, "Well, yes, he can live for himself, of course, but journalists have been guarding his house for several days. They say that they will not leave until they see him." Munyob looked out the window and used obscene language, because there were a lot of them outside the window. What idiots they are. Okay. He got up from the couch and decided that they would deal with them tomorrow. He needed to gather them in one place. He needed to tell them to leave him alone once and for all. After some time, a conference was being held at a hotel in the city. Many spectators were sitting in the assembly hall and several correspondents were gathered to greet Munyob as he entered. Someone was watching him and thinking that he thought that he would have to wait for him at the door for a whole month. Someone agreed with this man and said, "Yes, and he looks much more restrained than expected." One of those present heard about him that when he doesn't like something, he begins to behave indecently and overturn furniture. I wonder how this time everything will happen. The press conference began. Seo Munyob took a position next to the microphone and told everyone present, "Well, first of all, as they can see, he is back." He himself is surprised by what happened and imagines how surprised they all are. Well, then, the huge attention that is now focused on his person. While he continued to say these words, Yeho looked at him with a smile and thought, "Wow, he even seems to be behaving normally, as long as it's not the evil eye." At this moment, Seo Munyob with a menacing look says that he is already tired of all this. They should ask all the questions today and never approach him again. Yeho's expression changed and he thought, well, yes, and what did he hope for? He is the same as always. He said people should raise their hands and he would answer questions one at a time. Someone asked him a question. How did he manage to return alive from the last dungeon? He replied that he didn't know this himself, he just woke up in the hospital, but he didn't have a more detailed answer to this question. Another journalist asked him if he still remembered the last 17 years. He replied, no, for him 2005 was just a couple of days ago. Another person asked the question, has he already communicated with other heroes of the last war? He replied, no, it was just a business collaboration, they are not close. Someone asked again, does he intend to demand the state return his savings? Munyob answered with confidence, no, and asked the next one to speak. Some middle-aged man raised his hand and he asked him to ask a question. The man spoke. He had probably already heard from the head coach back about the Battle of Superhumans game. He answered yes, after which the man asked the question, does he have a desire to go into esports? The surrounding people began to look at each other with wariness and Yeho thought, standing still without any hesitation, well, there you go. Munyob suddenly replied, he has no desire for this. The man asked him again, right. Could he explain why? Munyob thought for a moment and sharply replied that he did not think it was necessary. The man grinned and asked again, but this is not because he feels capable of it. Seo Munyob pointed his finger at him and said with a smile on his face, if he were an old man with a receding hairline, maybe he would think so. The surrounding people turned to the man with a mocking look and the man was very angry, which is why he clenched his teeth. Seo Munyob continued to say, he just doesn't like this sport, that's all, he's not a clown and will do what he wants. Okay, thanks everyone, they're wrapping up the conference. Finally, Seo Munyob said that he hopes that he has satisfied their curiosity at least partially. Now he asks him not to bother him anymore from this day forward. Goodbye. After these words, he turned around and walked towards the exit. Yeho took his place at the microphone, grinned uncomfortably and thanked everyone for their participation, but suddenly someone shouted at him to stop. Seo Munyob turned around with a questioning expression on his face and the guy said that he had one last question. Yesterday the player Gerald Walker spoke about him. He said that the words of the 7 saviors are long in the past and they will never defeat him. What will he say about this? For some time Munyob stood in silence and suddenly asked the guy, Gerald Walker. He replied, yes, this is a famous American cybersportsman. He is called the best American tank. Munyob asked him again, really? And what? This Gerald Walker turns out to be the best of the best. The guy replied, no, the point is that there are 3 best in the battle. Nathan Bernard, France, Ron Mayer, Ireland, and Daniel Mansk, Germany. Walker is an outstanding player, but he's not one of those 3. Munyob grinned and asked again, clutching his head with his hand, are you serious? Even if so many years have passed, if he hasn't even entered the top 3, he won't talk to him. If he wants to fight him, then he won't fight in some game, let him come and say it to his face. He'll bury him in the garden with these hands. Along with these words, he showed everyone an obscene gesture, which was seen by many television viewers. Some gray-haired man saw this on TV and said, so he says, Walker. This man's name is Zachary Wood, an agency of American esports battle of superhumans. Some man also saw this and out of anger crushed the remote control in his hands, after which he said to him, Wood, he needs a ticket to Korea. Immediately, after some time, Yeho arrived home and started shouting to someone on the phone, asking a question, but it was impossible to say this before. He was interrupted by this shout from Seo Munob, who turned to him and angrily wondered how noisy he was, after which he asked him to talk on the phone outside. He was bothering him. Jeho told his interlocutor that he understood, and after the end of the telephone conversation, he sat down on a chair, took a deep breath, and Seo Munob told him that he was interfering with his watching TV. What happened there? He replied that the Premier League with the USA will now take place in 2 weeks. Munob answered him with indifference, which he understands, and suddenly Yeho started screaming in rage. It's all because of him. Doesn't he remember what Gerald Walker said? Munob asked him back in surprise, what did he say? He continued to explain to the one who was specifically trying to provoke him, and he asked him to tell him that he would bury him in the garden. Munob remembered what he was talking about and sluggishly looked away. Yeho frowned and spoke. He clearly lost his temper after his words. Munob noted that this is some kind of baby talk. There is nothing terrible about it, but Yeho continued to speak out that he publicly recalled that he was not among the 3 strongest people. Apparently this is what touched him. Now he wants to fight him, but due to the fact that he is not a player in the battle, he will take out his evil on their team. Munob asked him again with curiosity, what does this have to do with them? What a moron he is. Jeho grabbed his head, saying a proverb reminiscent of him, and Munob wished him good luck and he would lie on the couch for it. Yeho was about to express his indignation, but suddenly Munob got up from the couch and said, stop, if they have a Premier League, then Hae-young will also arrive soon. He also said that she is on the national team. After some time, a girl entered their house and shouted, Mom, it's her. Munob was surprised by the loud sound and wondered indignantly, who is that slamming the door? They scared him. Suddenly, he became wary and began to eavesdrop on the conversation. Son, he met Hae-young, greeted her with a smile and said, so she's already back. She replied that she hurried home when she found out that her uncle had arrived, and she wanted to see her and dad. Where is uncle? Son, he replied that he was lying on the sofa in front of the TV in the living room. He greeted her. She was very surprised by his arrival and opened her mouth in shock, after which she suddenly began to run towards him, hugged him and shouted, Uncle. She pounced on him. He looked into her eyes and said, Hae-young, she's not so little anymore, she almost killed him. She repeated with a joyful expression, he really came back. He stroked her head and answered, yes. He thought that she had already forgotten him. She asked again, did she forget him? Yes, he always played with her and treated her to chocolates and cookies. You can't expect this from Mom and Dad. He looked at her more carefully and said that she had really grown up. Children really were growing by leaps and bounds. She grinned and said in response, well, yes, she is already 23 years old. He asked her again, so she came because of the Premier League? She answered, no, she came to see him, and this is so an additional quest. He replied, well then everything is clear to him. Suddenly she crawled closer to him and said, but uncle. He looked at her questioningly and she continued to say that she wanted to ask him, is he really not interested in esports? He asked her again, did Yeho put her up to it? He apologizes to her, but he has no interest in it. She shouted to him, but why? He replied that he had business to do. She grabbed his hand and asked him again, even if she asked him. He replied, no way. Hae-young got a little upset and told him that he is no longer the same as he was before. He asked her again with irritation, right, I think they've all changed here. She turned away from him and answered, but he always did what she very, very much asked. He replied, well, yes, buy her cookies and snacks, for example. She realized something and said something, but still, okay, she has another request. She needs to do an Avatar Association test. Will he go with her? He asked her again, Avatar test. What is this? He looked back towards the TV where the program Gates to Hell, the final episode, was playing, and he took a deep breath and said, well, as much as possible. Hae-young asked him again, can he at least do this for her? She made a pleading appearance and added to her words that her dad was busy and he couldn't. He silently looked at her and shouted, okay, okay. He will go, but where is it anyway? She told him with a grin that he would soon find out about it. Superhuman Battle Association Korea, an employee from the association greeted Hae-young and Seo Munob and then asked them to follow him. They went into some room with a man who provided them with specialized chairs and said that he would help them test their avatar, the player Hae-young. She thanked him for this, after which the system reports that it is checking weapons and armor. 3, 2, 1 synchronization with the avatar. She put the helmet on her head and someone shouted at her to connect. Munob was behind the employee. He watched in surprise what was happening through the screen and she asked him a question, is he watching? Uncle. Let them give her a monster, she wants to move. At that moment she found herself opposite a huge ominous wolf. Munyob said, so they learned to do this too. The employee replied, the battle of superhumans is a virtual sport. Using advanced association technology, monsters, dungeons, and players are generated in virtual reality. Players who come to the association for the first time are asked to first create an avatar for themselves. He replied, it really does look like the real Hai Young. Well, then he'll see how good she is at it. He continued to watch what was happening on the screen, and suddenly the monster wolf rushed to run straight at her. She looked at this creature with a smile on her face, and suddenly there was a bright flash of light, and the wolf was dumbfounded for a moment, as Hai Young easily wrapped a rope around his neck and began to pull on it and strangle the monster, who grabbed the rope trying to remove it from your neck. Hai Young continued to attack the monster and swung her sword at the creature's head before cutting it off in one swift motion. She looked at the monster with a slight smile, and the system informed her that the avatar synchronization was successful. She could leave. She smiled at her uncle and ran sharply towards him and asked the question, how is this for him? He replied that this is not bad for a 6-year-old girl. She has great potential. She grinned and asked again, maybe he'll try it himself then. And in fact, she is already 23 years old. He gritted his teeth and answered with irritation. He said that he would not compete. She spoke back to him, and he doesn't need to do this, he should just try it, and that's all, because she is very curious, and she heard so much about his strength from her dad and wants to see it with her own eyes. She grew up never seeing him in battle, and by that time he was long dead. He looked at her silently, took a deep breath and answered, after thinking, okay, but only once, and only because she really asks for it. She showed surprise on her face and shouted at him, asking the question, is this true? Thank you, uncle. The employee pointed him in the direction and asked, Mon Munyob, does he want to try the game? They typically do aptitude testing first before creating the avatar, but since he's not going to compete anymore, they can start creating the avatar straight away. Hai Young said yes. This is great. He looked around and asked the question, what does he need to sit there? The man replied that if he entered the module in this form, then his avatar would be created unarmed and in sweatpants. He should first select a weapon. He picked up a shield and a sharp spear and said, having examined it, this is a little different from what he used in his time, a rather light weapon. This is a standard weapon. Usually players have customized weapons, but in the training room they only have standard ones. If he is uncomfortable, he can ask to find something else. Munyob replied, throwing his shield aside, yes, it's fine. A spear is enough for him and his patience is already running out, so he suggests getting straight to the point. He sat down in a chair, put on his helmet and thought about the battle. The system window informs him of the connection to the virtual dungeon. He decided to see what it was. The analysis of information about the weapon and body scanning began. Soon the scan was completed. The generation of an avatar has begun based on the information received. The administrator turned to Seo Munyob and asked if he could hear him. He is in a virtual room, a complete replica of their training room. Seo Munyob looked around and said that the feeling was similar to the one he gets when entering the dungeon gate. The administrator clarified that the synchronization between the avatar and his body is complete. Hai Young appeared on the screen and wished her uncle good luck. Seo Munyob began to warm up and asked to give him any opponent, like for Beak Hai Young. The administrator replied that he understood. He then pressed a special button and a monster appeared in the training room. It flew straight towards Seo Munyob. He calmly looked at it and said it looked like a Suliban. He feels that he is not the same as those he came across in his time. Looking at the screen and observing what was happening, the administrator said that everything was correct. It's special, it can only be hurt by aura, and it's generated according to the data of the strongest Suliban specimen in existence. Seo Munyob heard the faint sound of a monster. Having listened to this, he thought that it was in vain to bring the spear. He then tossed it aside and used a snap of his fingers to send the monster flying away. Hai Young and the receptionist were shocked by what they saw. The girl exclaimed that this was incredible. Did your uncle just kill it with a snap of his finger? He calmly asked what was wrong with this. So this is what happens when you kill it. The administrator adjusted his glasses and clarified that the Suliban is not the strongest of the monsters, but it is also impossible to kill it with a snap of a finger. Seo Munyob looked at the screen and said that he needed to stop joking and generate something stronger for him. He needs to check something. The administrator only briefly replied that he understood. At this time, Seo Munyob thought it was true. He doesn't feel the difference between cyberspace and real life. He needs to try the same thing here. Even if this is the strongest Suliban, he didn't even manage to warm up well. But what can you do? Suddenly, someone's voice was heard in a foreign language. Well, yes, they say about him that he is the strongest of the superhumans. How can Suliban compete with him? Seo Munyob listened and wondered what language this was. English. At this time, the man and Hai Young watched as the system in front of them suddenly lit up red and began to beep. They exclaimed, "What's wrong with the system? What's happened?" The administrator began to explain that the problem was that there was an attempt to connect from an external source. Suddenly, Gerald Walker jumped from the ceiling of the training hall, cutting the streams of fire with his weapon. He looked angrily at Seo Munyob and asked, well, is his invitation still valid? Seo Munyob didn't answer but just looked at him. Gerald continued, he came at his call, why is he so surprised now? It looks like he was scared. Didn't realize he would actually come. He doesn't know how many heroes there are, 7 or 9, but he will now prove that all their glory is worthless. Suddenly he screamed loudly and immediately ran towards Seo Munyob with all his might. Running up to him, Gerald swung his weapon and hit with all his strength at the place where Seo Munyob stood. But as soon as he looked at that place, he saw that there was no one there. He couldn't believe where he was. Suddenly Seo Munyob's voice rang out, is he scared? Yes, this cannot be. He was just thinking about the test he was planning. He then stood in front of Gerald Walker again, holding his spear. He also readied his weapon. At this time, Gerald exclaimed, how did he do it? Suddenly a voice rang out, don't worry. The door opened and 3 people appeared on the threshold. The man was very surprised when he saw 3 people, one of whom was the president of the association. He immediately said that this battle would be with his permission. Everything will be okay. Hai Young also saw her father and exclaimed, he said he was busy. The president of the association explained that this was agreed upon in advance, but apparently they were not informed. He is sorry. Then, Park Gen-T, president of the Korea Superhuman Battle Association, added, he hopes that this will satisfy them. He then turned to his manager, Emma Morse. She adjusted her glasses and thanked him for his cooperation. This is a very difficult request and they are satisfied. The president of the association recalled his meeting with Seo Munyob. Park Gen-T sat opposite him, watching him eat. He thought to himself that this guy was in very big debt to him. Just let him try to object later. Watching through the screen, the president thought he should be grateful. Because of this incident, he may well finally become interested in esports. At this time, a fierce battle was going on in the training room between Seo Munyob and Gerald Walker. Loud bangs were heard. Seo Munyob landed and slammed his palm onto the floor, but Gerald managed to withstand the shock wave. Seo Munyob thought that this big guy was better than he thought. He then used his analyzing gaze and saw that the enemy had strength 100, agility 81, speed 58, stamina 100, willpower 87, skills 80, aura 88, super strength armor, and invincibility. Seeing this, he was very amazed, 100 strength and endurance. He's truly perfect to be a tank. Willpower 87. He thought he was just a hot-tempered idiot, but it looks like he has more to show. Gerald Walker looked at Seo Munyob in surprise and asked why he was standing and looking at him so intently. In response to this, Seo Munyob smiled slyly and replied that it looks like he is not just a fool and a talker. If there was someone like him in his time, he would have taken him on a raid into the last dungeon. His super strength is also ideal for a tank. Suddenly he remembered how he discovered a new ability when he woke up in the hospital. He wanted to test this superpower on Sullivan, but it would be better to try it on this big guy. Immediately after these thoughts, Seo Munyob ran straight towards Gerald. The enemy was surprised, but immediately raised his weapon in response. At this moment, Seo Munyob stopped right in front of him, thinking that he could see him clearly. Gerald Walker couldn't understand, he stopped right in front of him. But Seo Munyob just stood there and stared at Gerald Walker. In response, Gerald said that he would show him something, and immediately after these words he struck him hard. Hai Young, who was watching this, exclaimed in horror, Uncle, why did he stop? Why did he let him hit? Gerald Walker, who heard her words, thought to himself that she was right. Seo Munyob abruptly stopped his advance as if he wanted to be killed. What was he up to? At this moment, Seo Munyob screamed, it hurt more than he thought. Immediately after this, a spear flew past Gerald Walker at high speed and crashed into the wall. Gerald wondered how he did it. He should have died, he didn't even defend himself. Everything around was filled with smoke. A cough was heard nearby, in the midst of which Seo Munyob cleared his throat and asked why smoke was generated for him. Yeho, Gen-T and Hai Young looked at the screen in bewilderment. Gerald exclaimed, no. The smoke began to gradually dissipate and among this Seo Munyob appeared, with the words, ta-da. How's he doing? Then he grinned and asked, did he say that he would show something interesting? His power of immortality was at work. Gerald Walker wondered in horror, how is this possible? Is he alive after such a blow? So how? Seo Munyob explained that he received cool superpowers after a failed tryst with death and is now immortal. The test gave a positive result. Not only did he not die, his superpower also quickly healed his wound. But that won't work. What kind of duel is this if he is invulnerable? He then asked the administrator, could he hear him? The administrator asked if something was wrong. He explained that he seemed to be immortal. He gained a new superpower after his return from the dead. The administrator couldn't believe it. Is he immortal? Well, how is this possible? Seo Munyob continued, it seems like yes. He thinks so, the fight will be unfair with such an ability. Is it possible to block the effects of superpowers? The administrator replied that it was actually very easy. Seo Munyob then asked to block this immortality ability. The administrator asked to wait a minute. and then press the special button, ready. Now he won't be able to use it. Gerald Walker, listening to all this, asked what? Immortal. Seo Munob explained that he simply decided to try out a new superpower. But since the ability works even in the game, he will not give him a chance to justify his defeat by saying that he has such an ability. With these words, he tightened his grip on his spear in his hand. Gerald started walking straight at him. He really brags a lot, just like they said about him. He wants to see how much the rumors about his skills are exaggerated. With these words, the man threw his spear aside. Seo Munob calmly replied, of course the real experience of fighting with him will be different from what he heard somewhere, because he is many times stronger than people can understand. Gerald Walker pointed at him with displeasure and said that they would see it. He must get up. Enough with the excuses, he must fight. Seo Munob squatted and protested that he had first defeated the top 3 players in battle. You can't bypass 4 demons as military leaders and immediately fight the Demon King. That's not how things are done. He had already been told that Gerald was not in the top 3. Hearing these words, Gerald Walker became very angry. Noticing this, Seo Munob grinned and asked, did he put pressure on the patient? After these words, the enemy clenched his teeth in anger and rushed at Seo Munob. But he repelled his blows with a smile on his face. Suddenly, Gerald Walker saw that there was no one at the scene of the impact. He thought that Seo Munob had disappeared. At that moment, he appeared behind the enemy with the words that he was here. But Gerald was perplexed. Is he hitting behind his back? The man then began to turn around, but before he could, Seo Munob brought a spear to his face. Gerald Walker immediately rebounded. Seo Munob grinned. He had a pretty good reaction. This is despite how much his viewing angle is blocked by the shield point. It's not bad, but it's time to finish. With these words, he got ready and threw the spear straight at Gerald's shield. He watched carefully as the spear flew towards his enemy, but at the last moment it flew past. Gerald Walker roared. He was specifically aiming for his shield. The spear changed direction just before the shield collided. Supernatural weapon control. So this is what this Seo Munob is like. And he exclaimed that he had won. But the man didn't agree, not yet. The spear passed the demonstration. He is quite alive. Seo Munob explained that he did this on purpose. He left him alive, and he is still dissatisfied with something. He will never defeat him with this huge shield. Gerald Walker asked displeasedly, what? Manhwa continued, just because he's big doesn't mean he needs a big shield. He should choose less. Gerald continued to angrily ask, what is he saying? In response to this, Seo Munob explained that he is the person with more experience giving him advice. But he turned out to be more than just a talker. Because of the large shield, he has difficulty seeing what is happening around him. The man lowered his eyes and sighed. Seo Munob didn't stop talking. He swears that he has been accused of having tunnel vision since childhood. Gerald Walker no longer answered anything, but simply looked at him. Seo Munob continued to explain, and so he chooses a large shield to block attacks and still be able to look around. The man lowered his eyes to the floor and sighed sadly. Seo Munob explained that this is a half measure. With strong opponents who would manage to use his vision against him, this choice would be his undoing. You need to change the shield to another smaller one. Given his level of agility, this would be the right decision. Gerald Walker looked up at him hopefully and asked if he was lying. Seo Munob grinned. Why would he do that? Even if he follows his advice, he is still blatantly superior to him in battle. Gerald paused and then said that she would probably try. Hai Young, who was watching what was happening on the screen all this time and wondered what. Yiho, standing next to her, asked with irritation why he was teaching him. He is already a strong opponent. At this time, in the training room, Seo Munob replied to Gerald Walker that he was satisfied with his answer. His work is over, so he'll go watch the series. Gerald looked at him in bewilderment. Seo Munob also added that the person who has more experience taught him a lesson, so he should remember to give him the tuition fee when he returns. Gerald listened to him and got up from his knees and said, okay, but he has conditions. Seo Munob was surprised. The conditions? What condition? Gerald Walker pointed his finger at him and explained that he wanted another duel with him. He will fight him in the Premier League in 2 weeks. Seo Munob explained that he is a funny fool. He said that he was not going to participate in the battle. He still has so many episodes of the series to watch, why does he need some kind of game? And he doesn't need his pennas. He changed his mind. Then Gerald came up to him, grabbed him and exclaimed that he would pay him with money or whatever he wanted, only he had to be at the competition. Seo Munob also responded irritably that he didn't want to. In response to this, the man growled and said that next time everything will be different. Seo Munob didn't answer anything, but just thought that he was crazy. There was complete madness in his eyes. Gerald Walker kept up with him, shouting that he should participate in the battle with his abilities. Don't sit on the couch and degrade. Then Seo Munob also got angry and shouted that he himself would decide how to use his abilities. At this time, the association president, Yiho, the administrator, Hai Young and the manager were silently watching what was happening in the training hall. But suddenly the president of the association smiled slyly and thought that this was his chance. Some time later, Seo Moonob was at Baek Ki-ho's house watching TV. The actors on the screen shouted to each other. The man exclaimed, "Sa-sun, Kim Sa-soon." The girl also answered enthusiastically, "Jin-young." Seo Moonob looked at the TV and asked, "Well, will they start dating already or not?" Suddenly the broadcast was interrupted for an urgent message. Seo Moonob stood up on his elbows and asked, "What?" Even at such a moment, the news anchor announced that Seo Moonob has publicly stated that he definitely has no intention of getting into esports. However, they have word from eyewitnesses of his recent duel with Gerald Walker that it is possible that his opinion on the matter may change. The audio is not entirely clear, but an anonymous source reports that, provided that the US team wins the Premier League with a score of 11-0 in the Premier League, at least that is what the American side claims. According to the same American side, Seo Moonob accepted these conditions. Seo Moonob listened to this and couldn't believe what was happening. He exclaimed, "When did he even say such a thing?" After a while, in the Korea Superhuman Battle Association building, Seo Moonob's loud scream was indeed heard. "What is it? Ah, Gen-T. Who is this anonymous informant? He will kill him with his own hands, just let them show him too. And what a video this is. They cut out the part where he refuses. He will also kill the fool who posted the video." He suddenly rose from his chair and slammed his palm on the table, saying that, first of all, as the president of the association, he apologizes for his tactless attitude towards the hero who had repeatedly saved the world. With these words he bowed deeply. Seo Moonob looked in surprise and asked what's wrong with him? Out of the blue, Gen-T explained that Gerald Walker had already won over the US Superhuman Battle Association to his side. Given the precarious position of the Korean branch, he could not refuse his offer. The public and the authorities also pushed. He apologizes, not as the president, but as his buddy. Seo Moonob was perplexed and said that his situation was clear to him, but still, the president of the association interrupted him, put his hand on his shoulder and solemnly announced that he had nothing to worry about. He came up with a great way to avoid trouble. Only if the USA achieves a clear victory with a score of 11-0 in the match without losing a single fighter will Seo Moonob participate in the friendly match. This is the condition he put forward. He said he was only interested in a strong team, and everyone agreed. So he has nothing to worry about. Although the level of the Korean team is low, it is not so low that in 3 games they will not get a single kill. But Seo Moonob interrupted him and exclaimed that he didn't care about it. He's not interested in these battles. Why is everyone so concerned about this? Gen-T explained that in any case the conditions are impossible to fulfill. Everyone knows his character, that's why they agreed. How long have they known each other? He asks to save him just once. In return, he will donate all profits to his favorite child welfare organization. He sincerely asks him to agree. Seo Moonob listened to this with irritation and thought, if only it weren't for the things of the past. Then he sighed, rubbed his forehead with his palm and said, "Okay." But only once. The president of the association was very happy and exclaimed, "Of course. Does anyone ask for more? He is very grateful." Then he rushed to hug him and tried to kiss him. Seo Moonob tried to push him away and said that he didn't need it. He then clarified that if they kill even one American during the match, he won't be able to participate, right? No matter what happens, he will not change his decision. Gen-T joyfully tapped his chest with his fist and exclaimed, "Of course. He can take his word for it. Since they've sorted it out, they can have dinner together." Then Seo Moonob asked if he had any treats. The president of the association immediately answered, "Of course. Anything for him. There is a tuna sashimi restaurant nearby. They can go there." At this time, Gen-T thought to himself that he did not break his promise, but he would apologize in advance. After some time, the voices of the presenters were heard on TV again in Jiho's house. The man was relaying the news they had received directly from the Korea Superhuman Battle Association. It was learned that Seo Moonob accepted the US offer. On another channel, the girl also announced that perhaps Seo Moonob would still participate in the battle. All channels were broadcasting breaking news about Seo Moonob, a match, battle. Seo Moonob looked at this, grabbed his head and exclaimed, "Where are his dramas? Why do they only show news all day?" Gen-T caused a stir. "I should have cut all ties with him right away." The host's voice was heard again on TV regarding a change in the schedule. Friday's broadcast of fast-paced low kick will be replaced by a special episode about Seo Moonob. Hearing this, he shouted loudly in irritation. Some time later, Seo Moonob stood in the living room and looked out at the street through the glass doors. He sighed and said that his life was not easy. Suddenly, he heard sounds coming from the street. He became interested and looked outside wondering what these sounds were. Outside, he saw Hae-young performing various tricks with her powers. Seo Moonob thought to himself, is she training? At this very moment, Yeho was explaining to Baek Hye-young that her reaction speed was quite good this time, but she needed to speed up even more. After all, she is a support damage dealer. To support the team, it is important to increase its agility. Hye-young replied that she understood everything, but Baek Yeho continued if she wanted to improve her agility. But then Seo Moonoob came up from behind and thought that Yeho was wasting his energy again. He then activated his analyzing vision and saw that Hye-young had strength 61, agility 90, speed 94, endurance 59, willpower 81, skills 63, and hooray 66. Super strength is teleportation, and noted that Baek Hye-young has very high speed, but her dexterity had already reached its limit. Moreover, Baek Hye-young's maximum parameter value is not comparable to Yeho's in the past. Therefore, she simply cannot do what he expects from her. However, her top strength and endurance are higher than her father's. He can't believe that with such data she was given the role of support damage dealer. This approach may have worked for Baek Yeho, but for Hye-young this path of development is a mistake. At this time, Hye-young fell to the ground and exclaimed that she needed a break. Coming even closer, Seo Moonoob thought that even if the ace of the Korean team is in this form, then the outcome in which they will not defeat a single American is quite possible. Baek Hye-young noticed her uncle and asked if he saw her training. He smiled politely and replied that he had seen it. She doesn't have to focus on dexterity. But suddenly Yeho added that she fell a little short. She needs to push a little bit. Seo Moonoob immediately turned to him and said that she is not him. Baek Yeho asked what? Seo Moonoob pointed his finger at him and replied that he should stop developing her speed and agility. She simply cannot become what he once was. Her agility has already reached its maximum. It's the same with the whip control technique. They have a similar type due to speed, and even superpowers are similar, so he decided to make a support damage dealer out of them, but they are different. He then turned to Hye-young and asked what she would do after whipping her opponent. She immediately replied that she would pull and knock him down, or he'll simply tie it up and transfer it to an ally. Seo Moonoob immediately exclaimed that this was wrong. She must deal with him herself. By imitating Yeho's style, she won't achieve good results. Support is not hers. Not only is she inferior to her father in speed and agility, but there are also no comrades next to her who were probably taken with the enemy. Therefore, strength and fencing are more important to her now. It is her sword that will put an end to the duel. With these words, Seo Moonoob raised his sword and whip and explained that he would only show it once. You need to look carefully. There's nothing complicated about it. After these words, he swung his hand and hit the simulator with his whip. He explained that you need to catch and cut it like this. Then Seo Moonoob pulled his whip and cut the exercise machine. Immediately after that, he turned to Baek Hye-young and asked if she remembered. Hye-young and Yeho looked at him in surprise. Seo Moonoob explained that it is impossible to take the life of an opponent with a whip, which means that you need to master the sword as skillfully as the whip, and so she needs to train in strength and fencing. From then on, he changed Hye-young's position to main damage dealer. After that, Seo Moonoob turned to Yeho and asked if he understood everything. He and Hye-young wondered at the same time, what? But Seo Moonoob continued, then they will start with simple strength exercises 500 times. Will she pull it? Baek Yeho and Hye-young thought about his words, 500. Seo Moonoob addressed them again, why aren't they moving? They should start already. 14 days left until a match, and all this time, starting from today, he will train her. During this time, the US national team was in a dormitory and training facility in Korea. Agent and manager John Kim contacted Gerald Walker. What does this mean? His abilities have improved significantly in just a couple of days. Gerald asked again, that is, has he become a better fighter? John exclaimed, definitely. After meeting with Seo Moonoob, he suddenly announced that he would change his approach to defense, and he even wondered what came over him. But after observing him, he noticed that his weaknesses were no longer such. If he sticks to this style, he can break into the top 3. It goes without saying that drastic changes require training. It will still be difficult for him to compete with speedy players like Nathan until he gets used to the new dribbling tactics. However, they will benefit enormously in the long run. Gerald Walker listened attentively and wondered how much it would be in monetary terms. John Kim happily announced that in his opinion it was over $10 million. If he nevertheless masters the style, then upon concluding a new contract he will be able to increase his annual fee by this amount. Gerald sighed, 10 million. Now we need to send Seo Moonoob this money. The manager exclaimed, what? Gerald Walker explained that this is a consultation fee. He will definitely drag him into the arena. You just have to wait. 14 days later, the Korea vs. USA match began at the Seoul National Stadium for the Battle of Superhumans. One of the presenters loudly announced that this day had finally come. Historical moment. He assured that the audience is looking forward to the meeting of these teams. Hero Seo Moonoob and star of American Superhuman Battle. They will soon find out how their confrontation will end. And now they will introduce the participants in today's game. Korean players are number 1 Ki Woo-hyun, tank, number 2 Dream Yubin, support, Number 4 Shim Yonsu, support damage dealer. Number 5 Lee Munho, support. Number 6 Lee Dongye, main damage dealer. Number 7 Young Taeyoung, tank. Number 8 Jai Yongsu, support damage dealer. Number 9 Cho Yonghwa, main damage dealer. Number 10 Yubiko, main damage dealer. Number 11 Kim Simk, tank. American players are number 2 Steve Maggie, the tank. Number 3 Alec Muro, tank. Number 4 Terry Miller, main damage dealer. Number 5 Lesia Irene, support. Number 6 Robert Fears, tank. Number 7 Aaron Clark, main damage dealer. Number 8 Chris Fallwood, support damage dealer. Number 9 Michael Shake, junior support damage dealer. Number 10 Daniel Shaksta, support. Number 11 Paul Gray, tank. Also the number 3 Korean player is Baek Hae-young, the main damage dealer. The host then announced that all members of the Ace team are in their own business, so they are looking forward to the results of the match. Another American player at number 1 was Gerald Walker, a tank. The host added that many people want to see player Baek Hae-young in her new role. Watching everything that was happening, Seo Munyub thought and mentally asked Hae-young not to let him down. After some time, the host announced that the dungeon was an old castle from the underworld, guarded by an army of skeletons, the Palace of Martha Borney. The dungeon has 3 floors, and each of them has its own boss. The first floor is Skeleton Warriors, the second floor is the Death Knight, and on the third floor a Bone Dragon and a Lick Await. Many people are watching this for the first time today, so he will tell you the rules. The rules of the superhuman battle include, firstly, to win you must destroy the enemy team. Secondly, points are awarded for killing non-game monsters and players of the other team. More points guarantee more bonuses. The color changes depending on the amount of it, so they welcome participants. Members of both teams come out to start the game. The hosts continue to talk. It's time to find out how this meeting will end. They start the game. Forward. Immediately after these words, both teams hurried towards the dungeon palace. The presenter announced that on the first floor the US team was greeted by 6 skeletons at once. At this time, the skeletons begin to walk towards the participants. Host again. It's worth looking at these precise movements. Team USA members begin to attack the skeletons. The presenter notes that the athletes are attacking, albeit slowly, but thanks to accurate and timely strikes, they organize excellent defense, a real iron wall. I wonder what is happening at this moment for the other team. And so, it's time to switch attention to the Korean national team. At this very time, Hae-young is thinking about doing what she learned. The athletes begin to run quickly. The presenter notes that it is worth looking at how fast they are moving. But what's going on there? The Korean team moves ignoring the enemy. Even in the second zone they just run past. Yeho watched what was happening and thought they were great. They must continue to move forward. If everything works out, they will win. During this time, the game continues and the host again points out that the Korean team used to be known for long games. Most likely they now have a clear goal, which is to defeat the boss. The risk is very high, but success will immediately bring many points. And if the leader is killed, the first floor will be closed for some time, which will give them a head start over the fighters from America. So the Korean team reached the boss. They approached the boss of the first floor, the Skeleton Warriors. They're on the attack right now. The presenter then turns his attention to Gerald Walker, who is waiting for something. He doesn't understand what's happening. Are American athletes not going to give up in battle? How can we describe everything that is happening? The Korean team successfully fights the Skeleton Warrior. Guys are using new tactics. Hearing this, Michael Shake turns to Gerald Walker and asks if they believed it. Maybe they should immediately go to the second floor before the first one is closed. He answers that they should wait a little longer. You need to go to the area with the boss. But he doesn't think they can do it quickly. Gerald Walker then turns around and Michael Shake says that he will lend him his power. At this time, the Korean team is fighting a skeleton boss. It's almost done. One of the team members yells at her to finish it off. Everyone else must cover. Baek Hae-young prepares to attack, but suddenly someone hits her. She can't understand what it is, where it comes from. The host announces that this is Gerald Walker. He used the Hurricane, that is, his teammate's super strength, and attacked the Korean team. Baek Hee-ho looks at this and exclaims, "What a madman. He moved so quickly." At this time, Baek Hae-young flies into the wall and is eliminated from the game. Gerald Walker notes that immediately starting the search for the boss was a good decision. However, whatever their plan, only victory matters. At that very moment, the US team attacked the skeleton boss and destroyed him. It was announced that the skeleton warrior had been destroyed. The first floor will be closed in 10 minutes. The announcement was repeated 2 more times. Gerald noted that it was time to end here. The US team then began their battle against the Korean team. The host announced that a team from the USA suddenly appeared and instantly defeated the Korean team. It's a pity for their fighters because they already had a hard time during the battle with the boss of the floor. Complete destruction. At this time, Gerald Walker approaches Ki Woo Hyun, raises his hand and says that they are done for today. After these words, he kills Woo Hyun. Immediately after this, the host announces that the end of the first round has come. Today's score is 11-0. Team USA ends the first round with an impressive result. The second round will begin after both teams have regained their strength. After a while, Hae-young walked down the corridor and thought that they had lost again. Even training under the guidance of his uncle did not bring results. With these thoughts, she looked into the room where the rest of her team and Seo Munyob were. Seeing her, he said, since everyone is assembled, then they should listen carefully. He couldn't look at them or the game without feeling sad. The team should take his advice. One of the team members protested that their coach was Baek Yi-ho, but Seo Munyob immediately told him to shut up. Baek Hae-young tried to address her uncle, but he immediately interrupted her and exclaimed, "Uncle." He had no desire to get involved in this, but he decided to feel sorry for them. They understood. He understands the original idea, but this is not enough to win. Americans are stronger in all respects, in experience, in skills, and so on. They can fight 1,000 more times, but they will still lose. The chances of winning are 0, but they don't think that they came here just to hear this. Now they must listen carefully. He will help them defeat at least Gerald Walker. Martha Borney's palace is one of the dungeons that he went through together with the president of the association. This is an easy location. Only the 3rd floor is dangerous, but even getting there is a problem with their skills. They must remember this and think through their strategy. They had a good plan in the first round. It would be great if it also worked. Firstly, intelligence is important. Of course, killing the boss before everyone else is great, but we must not forget about the main enemy. They need to keep an eye on other players. They wanted to quickly get into the main monster's room, but did not scout out the situation. Secondly, it is important to think ahead. After defeating the boss, they still have to fight with the US team. What condition will they be in at this point? If Walker killed her outright, what would the team do next? They completely failed because they missed the most basic points. And this is the national team. With these words, he put his head to his hand and sighed, "They are pitiful." Then he continued to say, "Okay, there is no point in discussing the past." This concludes their conversation about the first round. Athletes began to say that Seo Munyob himself started it, but he interrupted them and said that now they would get to the point. He will tell them what to do next. After some time, the second round began. The US team actively ran forward. The presenter announced that now the US team is much more active. Apparently they are going to use a 6-5 formation this round. The fastest of them will be enough for the best players of the Korean team, and Walker and the rest will finish them off. This tactic is best suited by ace team Gerald Walker. In this case, their team will definitely lose. Suddenly the presenter notices something and exclaims that this is impossible. Baek Hae-young immediately rushed forward as soon as she appeared on the battlefield. What tactics will they show them? The guys must not let us down. The Korean national team usually played defensively, but what do they see now? Hae-young has changed her stance and is acting differently, just like the rest of the team. Seo Munyob watched this and thought they were great. If they do everything as he said, then they will have a chance to win. At this moment she thought that this time they would definitely win. At this time, a player from the US team, Chris Fallwood, looked at the map and told Gerald Walker that he did not see them. There is only one road here. That means they will go after them. He replied that he understood. Gerald Walker also looked at the map and thought that they had seen their new tactics in the first round. So it's only a matter of time before he meets Seo Munyob. I wonder what he's like in real combat. Suddenly, a loud sound is heard behind Gerald Walker. He turns around and doesn't understand what's happening. There is another loud explosion and the Korean team lands on top of the US team. This is a team. Walker wonders why they are here. In fact, Seo Munyob carefully explained everything necessary to the Korean team. He exclaims that he speaks only once, so you must listen carefully. The main thing is intelligence. Hae-young will do this because she is the fastest. And if it turns out that there will be less than 5 people with Walker, then they will not catch the monsters and the boss. The whole team was horrified. He continued that only one road leads to Martha Borney's palace. Everyone who played the battle knows this. But there is another passage, a secret one. Only those who have been to the real dungeon know about it. Hae-young will walk down the aisle and scout out the situation. This way they can find out what the opposing team is really planning. Then all 11 players will go through a secret route, split into 2 groups and attack Team USA. This time they will teach them a lesson. And I also advised Gerald Walker to hit her in the legs. She exclaimed, "What? But he is known specifically as a melee fighter, how can his legs be his weak point?" Seo Munyob explained, and like this, Walker changed his shield to move faster. But now it is much more difficult for him to protect both himself and others. Most likely, he is not yet accustomed to a small account. Not that this was a completely weak point, but with their preparation it was better to aim there. After winning the first round, the Americans are under pressure to continue not to give them a single point, so they are a little nervous and will most likely watch all sides at once, waiting for them to attack. Therefore, it is important to get there unnoticed and attack suddenly using all your strength and superpowers. This is their new strategy. If they do this, they are guaranteed to be able to turn the tide of the match, so they have to trust him. Already in battle, Hae-young mentally thanked her uncle. Then the Korean team rushed into battle. The host announced that the Korean team is rapidly attacking. He's afraid the US won't have time to react. Baek Hae-young attacks Gerald Walker. Support cast a fiery concentration aura on him. During this time, Song Yubong focused on helping Hae-young. At that time she was rushing to attack Gerald Walker. He already had 2 murders to his name. He thought irritably that they appeared very quickly out of nowhere. Until this moment, he was confident of victory. The fight continued, and soon Baek Hae-young also had 2 kills to her name. The presenter observed this and noted that their supports were being hit from behind. Then he turned around and suddenly saw one of the team members rushing towards him, but he was able to cope with him. It was immediately announced that Gerald Walker now had 3 murders to his name. He shouted to his team that the situation was critical. Then he thought with horror that a long time would pass before the advanced detachment arrived in time. Now there are 3 of them, and 8 enemies. At this point, the Korean athletes began to attack the American athletes. Walker still thought they could handle it. Then he also attacked back. Gerald Walker now has 4 kills to her name. While he was distracted by the fight, Hae-young ran up to him from behind and attacked him with a whip. Gerald Walker couldn't understand because she wasn't here a second ago. Then she loosens the whip. At this moment, the presenter announces that the US team was suddenly attacked. They are trying to hold the defense. But the Korean players are in a more advantageous position. Even though the team lost her family, she was able to kill 3 opponents. At this moment, Baek Hae-young approaches Walker. He notes that they began to fight differently. Seo Munyob taught them. In response, Baek Hae-young points a sword at him and kills him. Suddenly, the presenter announces that their result is incredible. 5 American fighters are out of the game. The Korean team is taking the lead. Baek Hee-ho looked at the screen and couldn't believe it. At that moment, Seo Munyob approached him and asked if he had seen. He said they could handle Walker. Soon the host announces that the second round is ending. For the first time, the Korean team was able to surprise everyone. The other presenter tells him that no one expected this from them. However, unfortunately the match ended in victory for the American team. If their team had not been attacked by the second part of the US team, this round would have been much more interesting. But one way or another, the Korean team still killed 5 opponents. They haven't had such a result for a long time. It is worth noting the impressive moment with the explosion of the wall. This was the culmination of today's match, and at the center of everything that happens is one player, captain of the Korean team who personally scored 4 out of 5 kills, and this is their Baek Hae-young. After some time, the sounds of camera flashes were heard. Hee-ho stood on the red carpet next to the girl. She turned to him and introduced herself. She is a reporter for the XBS Sports TV channel about Jia. In this round, his players were able to show a completely different side of themselves. What are his thoughts and impressions about today's battle? Hee-ho seriously replied that his team and he thought it was a great experience. They got a good result and are not going to stop there. The reporter thanked him and added that they used a secret tunnel in the second round and it was impressive. How did they come up with this? Baek Hee-ho sheepishly replied that he was sure many people were surprised by this move. The game was played in an ambiguous location, so they requested special assistance before the second round. Seo Munyob was sitting nearby, listening intently. The reporter asked Hee-ho again, "Who is this?" Seo Munyob got nervous and said quietly that he was up to something again. At this moment, Baek Hae-young appeared next to the reporter and Baek Hee-ho. Oh Jeho immediately told her that she showed an amazing result in today's game. Does she have a new approach to training? Hae-young replied that her uncle worked with her a lot. The secret passage is his idea as a new tactic in today's match. Seo Munyob heard this and annoyedly asked why they always mention him in their conversations. Suddenly the voice of the association president was heard from behind. He explained that they were simply telling the truth. Seo Munyob won't calm down. He turned sideways to him and asked why he came. Seo Munyob pointed his finger towards the reporters and presenters and said that he was in charge here. Bamu needs to go and give an interview, but the president of the association immediately replied that he was too old for this interview and he was fine here too. Then Seo Munyob again irritatedly asked why then he was always near him. Gen T hastened to justify himself by saying that he needed a reason to stand next to him. He just decided to remember the old days and nothing more. Did anyone else find out about the secret passage besides the 2 of them? The tactics of fighting in the second round were his idea, right? He answered in the affirmative. It seemed to him that they were using the tunnel too much. He would love to come up with something else, but their guys are inferior to the other team in all respects. After thinking hard, he decided to use this option. It seemed like the best solution to him. The president of the association thoughtfully asked, "Is it he who taught her? It's like she's adopted his fighting style." Seo Muno muttered dissatisfiedly that he had no particular desire to teach her. With that he stood up, adding that he was glad he was able to see his plan in action. "He has a special talent." Seo Muno grinned smugly and said that he was surprised. The president of the association thought about it and added whether he wanted to find a better use for his skills. Seo Muno immediately became indignant. What kind of nonsense is this? He already won the argument. But Gent immediately hastened to assure him that he would not ask again if he refused this time. This is his last sentence. But first he needs to listen. The new season, the Major League, will start very soon. Seo Muno interrupted him and asked if he wanted to invite him to participate. But Gent put his hand forward and said that it would be too arrogant on his part. But it would be great if he could at least join the team. In the very first round, that's it. Song Seo Muno listened attentively. Gent thought he would refuse, but it was worth asking. But suddenly Seo Muno replied that he would think about it. The president of the association couldn't believe he heard what. What did he say? He asked irritably, is he so old that he has gone deaf? He said he would think about it. Gent was shocked by what he heard and thought, because he could immediately refuse. Seo Muno added that he thinks it won't be difficult. Watching Hai Young struggle, the case seems quite interesting. It's always interesting to watch, but being a participant is even more interesting. So he'll think about it. Anyway, the real dungeons have disappeared and you can only test your strength in the battle of superhumans. The president of the association hugged him tightly and joyfully exclaimed that this was a great idea. It's cool that he said that. The video of their national team match received several million views in an hour. There are a lot of enthusiastic comments under the video. Seo Muno ended the conversation. Okay, just let him stop hugging him tightly. He almost strangled him. He seems to be old, but has more than enough strength. Gent sheepishly replied that he was just glad he agreed. Seo Muno clarified that he said that he would only think about it. Don't let him get his hopes up too much. The chances are 50-50, but the president of the association also happily agreed. He should think carefully. After these words, Seo Muno wondered, does that mean there is very little left before the start of the Major League? The president of the association answered in the affirmative. After this, Seo Muno began to think, because they would have to select the best and the best for such an event. He doesn't like all this. Gent thought in shock that he was a quick thinker. Then he added that in any case, even if he agrees, he has conditions. The president of the association hastened to ask which ones. He doesn't know what it's about, but he's ready to do whatever he wants. Seo Muno grinned and asked, really? Great. After a while, when everyone returned home, Yeho exclaimed in surprise, how do you even understand this? But Seo Muno calmly asked about what. Still, it's very clear. The president of the association said that any of his wishes would be fulfilled if he agreed to participate in the battle with pro-level teams. A new life began for him, and he would happily spend it on the couch in front of the TV. Then he fell silent. Yeho hurried to ask what. Seo Muno put his hand in his head and explained that since he decided to take it, he needs to do everything properly. He doesn't think that he needs training, given the level of the players. But he understands perfectly well that he will have to drag the whole team along with him. Yeho sheepishly apologized for teaching her poorly. It's clear why he wants to do this. But what does he have to do with it? Seo Muno explained that besides Hai Young, he is the next one who is anything like you, and who besides him will be able to kill him. But it is not important. Immediately after this, Yeho exclaimed indignantly, kill him too. Hey, no way. They'll look again. He hasn't held a weapon in his hands for 17 years. Seo Muno grinned slyly and asked if the great coach decided to scare him. It's okay, you should trust him. He will try to get into shape in the remaining time. Baek Gen-T sighed sadly and asked why he did this. He understands that he is not as strong as before, right? He is already 48 years old. He immediately ordered him to stop making excuses for his old age. He then activated his analyzing gaze. It turned out that Yeho has strength 55, agility 79, speed 80, endurance 55, willpower 83, skills 52, aura 69, superpower teleportation. Seeing this, Seo Muno thought that he had indeed become weaker over the years, but he doesn't think it will be difficult to regain his skills with the right level of training. Then he smiled evilly and said that they start tomorrow. Did Yeho understand that? Yeho thought with horror that everything was over for him. At this time, the president of the association was sitting in his office, recalling the words of Seo Muno. He said that his first condition was to be on a team with Hai Young. He doesn't need newbies who will die right away. And the second is that Yeho is also participating. He imagines how many sponsors will appear when there are two of the 7 saviors on the same team. Then the president of the association picked up the phone and announced that he had a request. After some time, newspaper headlines reported that Seo Munyo would take part in one of the battles at the upcoming Korean Championships, which was 7 days away. Seo Munyo yells at Yeho that he is an idiot and questions what he taught him before. He asks him again if the technique is lame. Do you need to move a split second faster than the enemy? Seo Munyo pointed his finger at him and shouted, so he still remembers this. He showed a thoughtful look on his face and said, okay, he'll try to do it faster. He looked into the distance with a serious expression on his face and suddenly rushed to run towards Seo Munyo, after which he jumped sharply. His whole body glowed with a bright magical light. He found himself above the body of Seo Munyo, who covered himself with a shield. Yeho walked towards him with a sword in his hand, after which Seo Munyo flew to the side. Jeho spread his hands and asked the question, what will he say to this? Was it better this time? Munyo replied that it was good, but he seemed to have forgotten that before he managed to hit 3 times, not just once. Yeho scratched the back of his head and said with a smile that it was 17 years ago, so let him give him a discount. He leaned over sharply, touched his back with his hand and said, taking a deep breath, how tired he was. Does he know how difficult it is to train again at his age? Seo Munyo spoke back to him, and before he would have called this training more like a warm-up, so he shouldn't whine, they move on. Yeho shouted in fear, what did he say? They've been here for 8 hours already. Seo Munyo answered him with a look of irritation on his face, as if he cared. By the way, there is a series starting on TV soon, so they should be up to speed. Yeho turned around and shouted, he is still 30 years old. And he is already 48. He has to go somewhere today, so his series is cancelled. Seo Munyo looked at him questioningly and asked him what he said. Where should they go? After some time, they found themselves in the Superhuman Battle Association. A man named Yu Hyun-soo, who is the head of the development department at the Superhuman Battle Association, said that he was glad to meet them, Mr. Seo Munyo. He came to test their avatar. After these words, he introduced the guy standing to his right and said that his name was Brown Turner. He was from the World Battle Association and would help them today. Seo Munyo looked at him silently, after which he said with obvious irritation on his face, he wants to clarify something. Didn't they already do this test? He fought the walker, killed the monster, what more do they need? Hyun-soo replied, last time the check only affected his physical capabilities. They need to analyze everything else so that his avatar matches him as closely as possible. The subject's skills and the avatar's skills must be 100% synchronized. Of course, they had no problems with full synchronization, but it is better to be safe. Seo Munyo asked him back in bewilderment, what do you mean? Is full synchronization possible? Hyun-soo replied, yes, his avatar is literally him in the virtual world. It can even reveal skills that have not yet manifested and which he himself is not aware of. Seo Munyo was surprised by this information and said that it was surprising. He did not know that technology had stepped so far forward. Hyun-soo laughed and noted that their system is unique because it is kept secret, and the employees responsible for the work are scattered all over the world. Seo Munyo asked him, secret, isn't this just at development? Hyun-soo spoke in response, one could say so, but they say that the basis of the system is someone's supernatural powers. Munyo said with a thoughtful expression that this was quite strange. The power of copying the real world. Hyun-soo said, hesitating, well, not that it's so, but before he could finish his sentence, Seo Munyo asked him again, he doesn't know how everything works. Is it possible that those who created the superhuman battle system are pursuing some other goals besides the creation and development of esports? Hyun-soo replied that he didn't think so, after which Seo Munyo said with a terrifying expression on his face, even if real monsters burst into their world, he would be happy to fry it all. Hyun-soo suggested that he start synchronizing. And at that moment he began to think, his character is certainly not easy, he needs to be careful with him. The system voice notifies, then they begin, you need to check his strength, agility and aura. Seo Munyo stood in the center of the room and looked around. The avatar requires complete likeness, so he needs to try, it all starts with a test of strength. He looked at the screen with numbers and replied, okay. He is told that he just needs to reach for the handle. He did this and pulled out the pen, after which a bright spark occurred and the number 813 appeared on the screen. Hyun-soo told him, this is great, he should do it again. He pulled the pen out again several times and the numbers showed 819 and 817. The system window tells him that his strength is 79 out of 79. He saw this and wondered, strength 79. He didn't think about it. After which he asked the employees what should he do next. Hyun-soo looked at the screen and thought, this is not enough for a hero. Now he must test his agility. Does he see the switches on the sides? When the beep sounds, he will need to press this one at a time. He jumped and answered with anticipation, okay. Suddenly his eyes widened, he heard some sound and rushed to run in that direction. Having made several sharp movements, all the people around were surprised by what was happening and their mouths opened in shock. Yeho stood behind them, slightly confused. Who would have thought that a tank could move so fast? The system reports that the test has been completed. Seo Munob stopped and asked the question, how many are there? They answered him, 963, which is amazing. He grinned and said that he could do better and hit 917, after which he offered to repeat it. The employees agreed with him, and after a while the system again reports that the test has been completed. He was able to overcome the number 971. Hyan-soo opened his mouth in surprise again like everyone else and thought, wow, he scored even more than 970. He asked them the question, what is the best result? Hyan-soo replied, there is one player who has 1007. Seo Munob asked him again, is this Nathan Bernard? Hyan-soo asked him again, so does he know about him? He replied that Yeho showed him some videos, so yes, he knows. After which he continued to speak, it is also said that he is as fast as his friend in his youth. But at that moment he thought, although it is unlikely that he would surpass Yeho with his agility indicator. The staff inform him that they are continuing. Seo Munob with a malicious smile stretched his fists and thought about what he likes, that here he can get points, he will try to score 975. He heard the sounds again, stopped, closed his eyes, took a deep breath and began to think about the fact that he needed to concentrate. Why is he in such excellent shape today? After these thoughts, he took a step, opened his eyes, which glowed with a bright magical light, after which a bright light wave occurred that covered the entire area, and he rushed to the right place. Everyone was stunned by his actions, and Hyan-soo thought he really became much faster. The system again reports that the test has been completed. While Seo Munob was trying to catch his breath, the people around him were perplexed, and he asked them the question, what's going on with the numbers? Hyan-soo tried to say that this was impossible. Seo Munob replied, he thinks he did better this time. How many points did you get in total? Suddenly he saw the numbers in front of him and realized with incredible shock, 1007. 1007 points. Nathan Bernard, who is the fastest Superman in the world, has the same indicator. Is this the same meaning? His agility is 97, which is worse than those guys, but he was able to show the same result as them. Well, maybe he can push his limits. After these thoughts, he spoke out loud. He had one thought, he wanted to test something else, and he asked for the strength test again. Hyan-soo answered him, since he asks, then the test will be the same as last time. He can start when he's ready. Seo Munob closed his eyes again and thought, the most important thing now is concentration. He suddenly opened his eyes and realized he needed to act right now. After this thought, he sharply pulled the rope and a loud sound and sparks occurred. All the guys again looked at the numbers in shock and realized with horror that all the indicators had increased again. Seo Munob asked them again, so how much? He had 890 points, which was much better. They asked him again, is this enough? He replied that he wanted more. After these words, he looked at his palm and thought he was able to cross his limit in both strength and dexterity. But why did this happen? Is it possible to become stronger so quickly? This is wrong. Such rapid growth should not be associated only with concentration, but he already had something similar. Once he already experienced this feeling in a past life, it still lives in him. Going through the last dungeon was incredibly difficult. Then the future, on the verge of death, he was able to increase all his indicators, and he achieved this by willpower. Perhaps this force is still at work. What's the point in fighting at all then? With immortality and willpower, he will win against any person. It's as if someone specifically wants him to participate in the battle and win. He is informed that they will now test his aura. He should look at the sphere in front of him. He must touch it and let his aura in. The sphere will react to it. Seo Munob said that it was interesting. They used to work with weapons and just eyeball who is stronger. He is informed that they can now measure the aura with an accuracy of 1 point. As a rule, the aura indicator is valued more than others because the value of the aura is determined at the moment of awakening of powers and usually does not change. He thought about it, and it's true, it's very difficult to increase the aura indicator even through training. It seems his aura after waking up was about 96. He wanted to increase it to 100, but no amount of training helped him with this. However, now, he touched the sphere and the people around him again realized with surprise and fear that his aura was becoming larger. He also thought that now it is definitely 100. This is the maximum that a person can achieve. The system reports that the test has been completed. Brown Turner said in shock, "Oh my god." The numbers showed 1030. Seo Munob asked with a smile on his face, "What's going on?" They answered him, hesitating. He set a new record. "This is the largest number in human history." Seo Munob smiled, showed a thumbs up and said, "Of course, it's him." Hyan-soo told him in response, "The last one belongs to the Shirin of the Seven Saviors." Her result was 1012. He was surprised by this information and asked again, "What? Did this little girl have the best score?" Hyan-soo replied yes, he didn't think anyone cooler would appear. Her aura reading was no joke. Her physical strength was at rock bottom, but she always moved forward with the strength of her self-confidence. They asked her questions, does she have any brains? She must do what he says. She spoke back to Seo Munob, so she did. What about him? Now he imagines how angry she would be. Hyan-Su tells him that all the tests have been passed, but he has something to add to it. Seo Munyob asked, "What is this?" He replied that during the match he would not be able to use his immortal superpower. He reacted with silence and thought, well, this is fair because the task is to destroy the enemy team, and if it is impossible to kill him, then victory will forever be his. Hyan-Su said, he is sorry to limit his natural capabilities, of course, but the association is ready to compensate him for all the inconveniences. He replied that they could limit all this, but he would hardly need immortality anyway. But he wouldn't refuse compensation. Of course, he wants monetary compensation, but he doesn't need this ability anyway. After some time, a man in a hood came out onto the balcony where a crowd of people in the same cloaks had gathered, and he began to notify them to listen to him, brothers and sisters. Only he can save them, their only ray of light in this world. They must believe in him with all their hearts, because through their faith they gain salvation. They must see the face of the Savior. He understood the piece of paper and shouted, for their sake he rose from the dead. There was news on paper about the immortal dream Mumunyob, now he is immortal. He also has incredible strength, immortal man or god. Their savior is Mr. Seo Munyob. He offers to show him their faith. His portrait appeared in front of the entire crowd and the man continued to shout, the time of salvation will come very soon. A lot of people raised their hands in the air and started shouting the name, Seo Munyob. They've done this many times. At this moment, Seo Munyob came out of the corridor and looked questioningly at the crowd of these people, wondering who these idiots were. They kept shouting his name and how he is their savior. He is the hero of this world. They believe in him. Seo Munyob turned to Yeho and asked the question, who are they? These people don't look like journalists. He replied that this is the Salmon community. They consider him their god. He looked at him surprisingly and asked again, Salmon. Exactly. Did he see these guys from the hospital window then? Yeho answered him, yes, it was them. He asked again, but what kind of nonsense is this with his godlikeness? Jeho replied, the Salmon believe that the world is soon threatened with destruction, and in him they see their salvation. He asked him again in bewilderment, what was he saying? Have they gone completely crazy? Yeho spoke in response, he still returned to the world of the living, so they are confident that they are right. Seo Munyob had an angry look on his face and asked if maybe he should teach them a lesson. Yeho reached for him and asked him with fear where he went. He should calm down. Seo Munyob asked him, where? Didn't he hear? At that moment, there was a bright flash of light and Yeho switched him to stop, but he jumped up and landed right in front of a crowd of people, after which he looked at them with anger and began to shout, everyone should shut up. People opened their mouths in surprise and began to realize that this was their hero and their savior. He kept shouting, they should shut their mouths. Or should he use his power? All the voices died down and he said, great. They were finally silent. He thinks they all know who he is. Someone shouted, yes, he is a hero. He continued talking, in general, but suddenly shouted sharply, they should stop running after him, they should leave him behind. They're just a bunch of crazy idiots. People were stunned by such an insult and were dumbfounded from bewilderment and surprise. He continued shouting and asking if they were interested in following him all day. They don't want to get a job. Do they have some kind of main person? Let him come out here and he will show everyone what a savior he is. People began to whisper among themselves that the savior was angry with them. They wondered, but what did they do wrong? This is impossible. He is their savior. That's right, this is just a test of their faith. They realized that they had to show him the strength of their faith. They looked at him with smiles on their faces and Seo Munyob looked at them questioningly in response and suddenly they began to tear out his name again, which he was incredibly surprised and thought about, after which he wondered, are they completely sick? At that moment, his body trembled with anger and Yeho tried to say something to him. Beads of sweat appeared on his face from fear and he said, what a horror. Suddenly Seo Munyob began to furiously say to those around him, 10 seconds. If they don't get out of here in 10 seconds, he'll kill them all. Yeho started screaming at him to stop, but he kept screaming, right now he will turn the entire crowd into ashes and no one will help them. Yeho again yelled at him to stop and cool down, calling him an asshole. A few minutes later, many people in long cloaks were lying on the ground. Bewilderment was expressed on their faces, they were in an unconscious state. He grabbed one of the tearful children and asked, little boy, will he still follow him? He shouted back at him out of fear, no, he won't do it again. For this, he patted him on the head and let him go, and Yeho stood behind him and watched what was happening in bewilderment. Finally, Seo Munyob asked the boys to continue to try to think with their own heads and not listen to others. Did they agree on this? Now he can leave here. After that, he abruptly went down to Yeho and said, that's it, now they can return to training. Jeho continued to watch a bunch of attacked people and said, his friend? But suddenly Seo Munyob asked him again, what is it? He replied, he's really crazy. Seo Munyob said in response that it sounds like a compliment, but they are crazy here. What the hell is with this cult? Jeho took a deep breath and said, okay, they should leave already, the journalists will come running. Seo Munyob replied, they can also be beaten, after which Yeho asked him a question. Does he even understand that in this way he will attract even more attention to himself? He asked him again, so what? He dragged in that crowd of journalists who asked about the orphanage. At that moment, some unknown man in a burgundy cloak rose up, silently looked at the city and said, grinning, Savior. Seo Munyob continued to say that then they would be less interested in other people's lives. Yeho replied yes. At that moment, behind him, Seo Munyob noticed something terrifying on top of the building and focused his attention on it. Yeho asked him in fear what was wrong with him. At that moment, on the roof of one of the buildings, the unknown man disappeared, leaving behind a magical light. Seo Munyob replied that it seemed to him. Some time later, the day of the match arrived. Incheon National Airport. An agent of the Superhuman Battle Association from the United States named Joe Pelman waved his hand, and those around him discussed, is it really him who personally came to Korea? It is probably because of Seo Munyob's participation. He said that he had not been to Korea for 15 years and hoped that the era of superhumans had returned to this beautiful country. The girl next to him said, of course, many talents were born here, which he took to the USA. He even became agent number 1. He told her in response that he could not take the best, and the girl told him, Mr. Back is not participating in the battle of superhumans. All the saviors were never interested in this. Only Sharon showed interest because she was quite young, but quickly refused when she learned that restrictions would be placed on her in the game. He asked her again, but what could he do? But her test scores are superior to everyone else. It's really true, she alone could finish off the opposing team in an 11 versus 11 match. He missed them then, but he won't miss them now. He clenched his hands into fists and said, the best fighter will be his. Seo Munyob, hero of humanity. Suddenly the girl stopped him and asked him to wait and take a look. Behind them there were many journalists who were already photographing his exit, and he looked questioningly into the distance and saw a man in glasses heading in the other direction with a suitcase in his hand. This made him very worried. This man's name is Jake Rand. He is a Superman and an agent of the Association of the Battle of Supermen of Europe. He got angry and said, Rand. Rand also stopped and wondered if it was Joe Pelman himself. He lowered his glasses, winked in his face and said, let this battle be fair. Pelman, gritting his teeth in anger, thought about it. It's easy for him to talk about this, but he will never lose. They made eye contact and the moment was captured by journalists who shouted that it was incredible. They were both here. At that moment, another unknown man appeared with expensive rings on his fingers. He was wearing expensive shoes and not alone. He asked the question, he destroyed their business with dungeons and so calmly appears here. The other guy spoke back, he didn't think he would have the desire to participate in the battle. Well, they won't leave it like that. These were the Morau brothers, Chan Morau and Philippe Morau, owners of the Parisian Lumiere Club. Seo Munyob, they should get his autograph or sign a contract. Do something. He wanted to meet him during the war, but then there was no opportunity for this. Everyone found themselves in the same room and silently looked at each other. Pelman thought they all came to pick up Seo Munyob. Everyone was alarmed by each other's appearance and suddenly there was silence at the airport. At that moment a girl came in or the sound of heels broke the silence. The untouchable of this world, the youngest of the 7 saviors, Sharon. She stopped and asked the question, where was her younger brother? There were a lot of people near the competition field. Seo Munyob said it's good that the population decreased during the war. Yeho shouted that he shouldn't say that. He answered him, oh well, it's a fact, what's wrong with that? Jeho asked him to try to control himself at least today. He got out of the car and said that he would think about it. They both walked onto the red carpet and walked inside the building. There were a lot of journalists filming around them. Seo Munyob said with a confident expression on his face, well, now they're going to have fun. The people around were shouting Seo Munyob's name. Jeho walked behind him and wondered why all this was needed. Seo Munyob said he should take care of it. At that moment, many guys in suits approached them and shouted to him, Seo Munyob, Bikiho, they should give them an interview please. Jeho tapped Seo Munyob on the shoulder and shouted at him that he was asking him not to say anything unnecessary. He asked him again with an irritated expression on his face, what did he say? He is completely crazy. Did you use him as bait? At this moment, many journalists had already formed around him, handing him microphones and asking questions. One of them shouted, how can he explain his desire to participate in today's game? Is he not afraid of losing to younger athletes? How is his moral and physical condition? Seo Munyob wondered if Bikiho would end. Does he even know that Lady Sharon of the 7 Saviors is also here? How does he feel about meeting her for the first time in 17 years? He asked again, little girl, did she come to this match? He was told, yes, Mrs. Sharon recently flew to Korea to watch the Battle of Superhumans. He asked the journalist in bewilderment why did she need this. He replied that she said she had a younger brother here. He brushed his teeth and said in shock that he didn't understand anything. What other brother? Is this him? After some time, he entered the room, sharply opening the door. The people around him were surprised at his appearance and discussed whether it was really him. He was one of the 7 saviors, a living legend. What real skills does he have? Wow, he came here himself. Seo Munob turned to Yeho and asked him if he heard it. He asked him again, what was he talking about? He shouted, Shuren has arrived. Yeho grinned and said, wow. Hai Young appeared behind him, who was surprised by this news and shouted, Shuren is in Korea. Yeho patted him on the shoulder and asked him to be careful, there is a crowd of reporters here ready to tear him to pieces. Seo Munob asked him to remind him who provoked them and abandoned him. Yeho told him not to say that, he should prepare for Shuren to appear. He said, since they started talking about her, could it be that the little girl had come to take revenge on him? Jeho replied, it's unlikely that this is for revenge, so many years have passed. But he shouldn't think that he forgot about the reporters and how he left him to them. Baeker, 17 years ago, Superman from China, Shuren. One of the Great Seven, one of the 7 saviors, the only daughter of a wealthy family. She successfully developed her abilities from childhood, and at the age of 17 she lived like a real queen. One day she screamed at him that she couldn't do it anymore, really. Her willpower was 20 out of 40. And most of all, she hated people like Seo Munob. He shouted at her to turn her head and think what she was doing. Is she even normal? Useless people always insult. She should be moving faster, why is she standing? Does she even know how to use force? Idiot. Tears appeared in her eyes during training. He pointed his finger at her and shouted with all his anger, even a monkey could have done a better job. She has nothing at all but strength. She was very angry at his words. Useless people also behave unhumanly. At that moment, Hai Young grinned at him and said, Uncle, he needs to buy a tuxedo. She is afraid that a funeral awaits them. Seo Munob's face turned purple with fear. Yeho touched his forehead with his hand and said, okay, they will think about it later. There are more important things to do. Suddenly he shouted to the rest of the people in the room, they should listen to everyone, they should know how such battles take place, but now they have new players, so he tells everyone again. The match today is for charity. The athletes are divided into the Love Team and the Hope Team. As they know, the team includes players from the national team, and the Hope Team is new, except for Baek Hai Young. The leader of the team of Hope is he, Baek Yeho. Main DD position, main weapon is sword, superpower is teleportation. Seo Munob will also be participating in the match. He also greeted everyone. His position is tank, main weapon is spear 4, shield. Super strength roll, analysis incomplete, immortality blocked. Yeho scratched the back of his head and said with a smile, he is worried, since he has not held a weapon in his hands for a long time, that he now relies on each of them. The guys started shouting that they would not let them down and they were counting on him. He should lead them to victory. These words belong to the deputy captain of the team of Hope Pak Cholo. Seo Munob looked at him and thought, he speaks smoothly, he still knows how to speak. He thinks that Yeho is really suitable for the role of captain. Next, system windows appeared in front of Seo Munob's face, reporting all the characteristics of Baek Yeho and Baek Hai Young. He looked at it carefully and wondered, well, he thought the 3 of them would make a good and powerful team. But the rest are neither fish nor fowl. Suddenly he saw a guy named Choi Hyuk, as well as his characteristics, and this guy said with delight on his face, Captain, he is counting on him. He has aura concentration. He can use aura in his weapons, as well as internal strength. He can use aura to protect the body and reduce incoming damage from enemy attacks. His strength limit is 90 and he can be a good tank if trained properly. At that moment, he pointed his finger at him and asked him to come to him. Choi Hyuk was surprised by this proposal and asked again, what? Hey, okay then. He came closer to him, greeted him with bewilderment and said that his name was Choi Hyuk, his position was the main DD. Seo Munob said, yes, damage dealer. Wait, what? He didn't understand, melee dealer. Hyuk got excited and shouted, that's right. He was, that is, he is in the position of main DD in the team. At this moment, Seo Munob judged him for being in a hurry and thought, God, what an idiot, and asked him to say again, is he not tanking? He shouted back, no way. Since childhood, he wanted to become a tank like him, but he didn't have enough talent for this. Seo Munob asked him, what about his superpowers? He shouted back, he can use aura on his weapon. Munob asked him again, is that all? He shouted back, yes. Seo Munob thought about it, he doesn't even know about the second power, so DD. Surely he was given the position only because of his appearance. Some old man shouted to him, he's so frail, who is he going to tank? He shouldn't make him laugh, he'll be a dealer. Seo Munob approached Hai Young and told her that he needed a shield, she should bring it to him. She ran sharply and shouted to him, 1 second. Hyuk looked at him questioningly and after a moment a shield appeared in front of him, which Seo Munob gave him. Hyuk looked at this in bewilderment and asked again, shield. to him. But why does he need this? Seo Munob replied that there is no time to explain, so he will only explain the basic knowledge. He must constantly move and protects the left side of his body with this shield. He removed it, attacked, moved and defended again. In general, defense is attack, defense is attack. Did he understand that? Hayek said in bewilderment, but he's a main DD. Seo Munob answered him with seriousness, no, he's just an idiot. Which one is DD? Someone thought. He of course heard that Seo Munob is crazy, but to change the player's position at the first meeting, what did Choi Hayek do so wrong? Will they really work together? At this moment, Hayek was very scared. He turned his head from side to side and spoke in a trembling voice. But the captain, Jeho, silently watched what was happening and suddenly said, great, then they have 4 tanks, 6 dealers, and 1 support. He agreed with what was happening. Hayek is lost in thought. The captain pretends not to hear this. They have decided on their position in the game. Now it's time to get their costumes. Seo Munob picked up the suit and wondered, is it so light? Jeho replied, yes, exactly, the armor is light, but very strong and comfortable, isn't it? He replied, yes, there is such a thing. Is he okay? You can't tell by his face. Jeho answered, not really, he didn't think that one day he would have to wear this uniform himself. But there will be no problems with weapons. He prepared something especially for him. Seo Munob looked at him questioningly and he continued talking. And it's true that it fits perfectly in the hand. It's a good choice. He said that it's something special. Isn't this a real weapon since saving the world? He must make him laugh. They made this spear less than a year ago. Jeho asked him not to relax. He is really very strong and has fought real monsters before, but the rest know how to fight people. They are weaker than him, but they have more experience in such battles. More precisely, they are more experienced than both of them. Seo Munob asked him with a smile, what is he saying? He shouldn't worry about it, Captain Ki-ho. He offers to show his older sister a great game. After some time, the squeals of the fans could already be heard. They showed posters with hearts and shouted loudly with joy. Team Hope versus Team Love. Even by appearance it is easy to tell where the national team is located. On average, all their stats are at 70 points, their average level is 60, which means they are slightly, but superior to them, although even with this gap they can win. Seo Munob asked Ki-ho in his ear what guided his choice of players. He replied that their indicators were approximately equal. He thought about what he knew. This is a standard type of selection, so as not to recruit too strong and too weak fighters into the team. Suddenly he noticed something was wrong. It was a blonde guy who looked into his eyes and chewed gum. He wondered, what kind of idiot is this? Although it has good characteristics. This guy's name is Shim Yeon-soo. Mental strength is not the bottom, but the complete bottom. The limit is 60. But he only increased it to 26. How did he even get accepted into the team? In a real battle he would have died immediately. Yeon-soo asked him why he was staring like that. Man. Seo Munob asked again in bewilderment, is he saying this to him? He answered, yes, uncle, to him. Yeon-soo looked at him angrily and thought, Seo Munob, he already saw him at the last match. Did he decide to participate in the game after the war? He has no idea what a battle of superhumans actually is. Seo Munob spoke to the other guy. He just realized that he wanted to switch places with him. He stood in front of Yeon-soo and asked what kind of person he would be. He sees that he doesn't like being here. Yeon-soo said in response, of course, during the match he also behaved arrogantly. This is quite funny, considering that he has never participated in a superhuman battle before. Seo Munob chuckled at his words and Yeon-soo asked him what was funny about what he said. He was in this round for sure, but before he could finish speaking, Seo Munob asked him who his father was. Yeon-soo asked a question, does he know the vice president of the association? Seo Munob understood, so he guessed right. Suddenly the guy was surprised. How should this be understood? At this moment, the commentator on the battlefield says, attention, he asks all players to enter the arena. Seo Munob looked at Yeon-soo and asked him to go, calling him son as a joke. Yeon-soo shouted back, what did he mean? What does he know about his father? He replied that he was just wondering how someone like him raised such a young idiot. With people like him, it's hard for him to even breathe air. He basically hates arrogant freaks who hide behind someone's back. But thanks to him, because thanks to him, he had a wild desire to play the battle and defeat him. He should get ready to eat dirt. Idiot. All the players entered the arena. Many people shouted the name Seo Munob. He looked around and the commentator said, now the hour has come. They will finally see Seo Munob in the battle of superhumans. The match may be a charity one, but it is impossible to imagine a more interesting event. Today they can see many celebrities here in addition to the people who came as spectators. This is Gerald Walker, a member of the U.S. National Superhuman Battle Team. Joe Pellman, Superhuman Battle Agent from the United States. Jake Rand, a Superhuman Battle Agent from Europe. Shirin, one of the Seven Saviors. The Moreau brothers, owners of the Parisian Lumiere Club. Well, he thinks it's time to start. so they start a battle of superhumans. The first match will take place in a special Aj's cave. This represents 3 circles, in the center of which there is a secret path leading to the dungeon. Spiral Cave Aj's. Monsters in the cave are represented by skeletons, serpents, and spiders. The Love Team represents the Korean national team, and some members of the 7 Saviors play for the Team of Hope. Who will take the lead in this unique match? 10 minutes ago, Yeho started the briefing and said that everyone should listen carefully. 2 teams will simultaneously start moving each from their sector. The starting point for the Team of Hope is in the 5th sector, and the Team of Love starts moving from the 1st sector. These zones are located exactly opposite each other. They will start hunting in Zone 5-1 and will jump to move to 5-2. They will clear these zones with them, but why will Seomunyob go forward to Zone 5-3 and kill the boss, the Serpent? Since this is the boss of the area, after this kill the dungeon will be sealed, so they will have to keep a close eye on the time during the hunt. Seomunyob replied, okay, he will do everything. The people around him wondered, would he kill the serpent himself? Doesn't killing a boss require at least 5 players? Even super strong teams send at least 3 players. After that, they will clear the 6th sector and move into the inner ring. Most likely the enemy team will overtake them somewhere along the way. But be Kai-young, Seomunyob, and he will do this, no matter how many there are, the 3 of them will definitely kill everyone. Seomunyob thought they can immediately go head-to-head with the full squad and win. Bikiho, why is he so insecure? Although this is a great chance for him to understand the battle and just warm up, and in the second round everything will be different. The starting point for the Hope team is Sector 5-1. Yeho loudly calls for the fighters to take their positions. The members begin to take their positions. Among them, Baek Hye-young is the main damage dealer. Baek Yi-ho is the support damage dealer. Seomunyob is the tank. The second tank is Gwa Choi-hyuk, who is very worried about his position. Seomunyob looks to the side and grins. He hasn't seen black creatures with legs for a long time. At this moment, large spiders with red eyes begin to descend on the webs from above towards the team. At this time, the Love team is also at its starting point, Sector 1-1. They are surrounded by the same spiders. Team Love Captain Ki Woo-hun yells at Yeonsu to attack the spiders. He replies that there is no need to remind him, he already knows what he is doing. With these words, main damage dealer Shim Yeonsu attacks the spiders with fire. Suddenly he remembers Seomunyob's words and indignantly thinks, who does this old man take him for? He won't leave him alone. This man is one of some 7 saviors. No matter what happens, he will kill him with his own hands. Then he starts shouting for everyone to move back, and begins to use his fire abilities while remembering Seomunyob. At this time, Seomunyob shouts Beak, Yeho to act. Yeho begins to attack the spiders sharply, waving his weapon. After a while, he shouts to Seomunyob that he is retreating. Seomunyob begins to cover him and deal with the monsters. The presenters note that this is the famous duet. The crowd is cheering. The presenters continue to admire. Crowds of spiders attack them simultaneously from different sides, but they masterfully deal with everyone. Seomunyob exclaims happily that they have cleared one area. Yeho crouches down and sighs, his back hurts. Seomunyob then looks forward and notes what is left on that side. They start attacking together again. At this very moment, Choi Hyuk is watching them and notes that this match is easier than their usual arena matches. But for Seomunyob it's like a lossless game. Was he always this good? Not that brute force is his main weapon, but here it is. He uses his super strength. Gwa Choi Hyuk then decides to go into battle as well. He notes that it is a little unusual to use a shield, since he has always only applied aura to the sword, but now he will try to concentrate the aura in a different way. He wants to see what happens. Then he goes into battle with a menacing cry and strikes the spiders. He also tries to think about how to maintain concentration and defend himself during an attack. Seomunyob watches him from the side and asks, since when is he so good? Then he smiles again and notes that this is good. He is tired of waiting and doing nothing. With these words, Seomunyob goes into battle and immediately attacks one of the spiders. He directs his power at the monster and hits it with all his might. The Moro brothers, watching this, exclaim, this is the technique. They then turn to Shuren and ask, is this a meter attack? This is Seomunyob's calling card. Shuren notes with displeasure that this is true. Meter attack, although it looks like a regular spear attack, but in fact at this moment he is using super strength, thanks to which the spear follows its target at the highest speed. With this force, without releasing the spear from his hands, he makes an accelerated lunge, hitting targets within a radius of 1 meter. All this is needed to create a super fast attack that is difficult to dodge. This power has much greater potential than a normal attack. And with all this, despite the use of such a complex technique, Seomunyob is relaxed and calm, so from the outside it seems that this is a normal attack. A technique when performing that cannot be mistaken from the moment of the first movement until the very end. He uses it playfully, whether 17 years ago or now, Seomunyob is still the same. At this time, Seomunyob turns to his team and shouts that everything is clear on this flank. At that very moment a large spider descends towards him from above, but he notices it. Then he turns around and cuts it open, saying that it's better to finish quickly. This spider can't escape. Then it was announced that Area 5-1 had been cleared. After a while, the athletes gather around Yeho and he announces that they are all great. Now they are moving into Area 5-2, but where has Seo Munyob gone? Choi Hayek replied that he moved on. He said that Seo Munyob explained that he would go to clear out Area 5-3 and offered to go with him. Yeho sighs, everything is clear, but this is the right decision. Seo Munyob may look impulsive, but he acts with calculation. Fine, they can go to Zone 5.2. Athletes listen to him. At this very time, in Zone 5-3, Seo Munyob meets with the boss of the 5th sector, Serpent. Seo Munyob greets him and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. How he wanted to fight this. The serpent begins to hiss furiously. Seo Munyob sighs and tells himself to pull himself together and concentrate. He screams at the monster to attack. The monster growls menacingly and rushes straight towards him. But Seo Munyob bends down and ends up right under the serpent. He then prepares and swoops in and kills it. After the attack, he notices his team and asks in surprise, are they already here? He thought they would need more time to clear the area. The team looks at him and admires him. He really defeated the serpent alone. Seo Munyob then began to explain to the athletes how he realized from a match that the more monsters and opponents he kills, the stronger he becomes. To see changes, they need to survive at least one round, and therefore he trusts them with everything else. Yeho and Hae-young have to go after him. He has a great plan. After some time, the presenters announce that, having left the destruction of small monsters to other fighters, the 3 main players of the Hope team went to hunt the Love team, which was still busy clearing the area of monsters, but would be able to notice this trio. They go where there are the least moving objects. As they head there, Seo Munyob reflects that when he fought the serpent, he killed it in almost one hit. By killing monsters, he can quickly increase his strength in battle. But so far his aura is at the 5th level, that is, at the lowest level of blue. In this case, the spiritual power will be 110 points. Suddenly Baek Yeho shouts to him that they will soon go to Team Love. Why doesn't he have any plan? Seo Munyob objects, how not? What they do is the plan. Jeho exclaims, he promised to try. Seo Munyob immediately reassures him that he has an idea. On the opposing team he saw an athlete similar to Shuren. He has good physical strength, but has a problem with mental strength. Baek Yeho clarifies, is he talking about Yeonsu? Seo Munyob confirms that I think that was his name. He doesn't know if he'll be one of the players they target now. If not, they'll figure something out along the way. But it will be better if Yeonsu is there. At this time, Team Love is in Sector 12. Team Captain Ki Woohan shouts to the team that the sector is clear. They must end the hunt. Then they must split into 2 groups. 5 people go to Sector 9, the remaining 6 people go to Sector 11. The athletes ran forward. The 5 members of Team Love arrived in Sector 9 and began to fight the spiders. Shim Yeonsu also begins to use his powers and realizes that thanks to his hunting points, his aura is already yellow. He will see Seo Munyob again. Suddenly one of the athletes shouts that they must move on. Move to the next area. But Yeonsu continues to think that with such an aura, he can crush even Seo Munyob. Suddenly, someone next to him shields him from the attack and yells at him to be careful. Shim Yeonsu realizes that this attack left him with a wound and cannot believe that it was a spear. They were attacked. At the same time, in Sector 11, where 6 members of the Love team are located, a notification arrives that an attack has occurred. It was Seo Munyob. The athletes said that they would immediately come to the rescue, but suddenly they realized that they were also attacked by Team Hope. The athletes of the Love team exclaim, are they here too? Choi Hayek remembers Seo Munyob's order, when the serpent is finished, they will help him, Yeho and Hae-young with an attack on the enemy team. They're in the national team, so it won't be easy, but they will be able to kill them all. They will quickly finish their business and come to the rescue. Team Nejda is preparing and rushing forward to attack. At this time, Seo Munyob and Yeho are on their mission. Seo Munyob holds the shield that Yeho is sitting on and asks how it was possible to block his attack. The blow was quite strong. Baek Yeho calmly tells him not to say anything stupid. He is already quite weak. Seo Munyob also tells him to stop, he just doesn't understand the new generation. Then he wishes him a good trip and asks him not to die, otherwise he will be ashamed. Fine. Yeho yells at him to start quickly. He agrees and with all his strength throws the shield with Yeho towards the opponents, he teleports. Then once again Seo Munyob throws his spear forward and runs towards his opponents. Beloved team members shout that Seo Munyob is targeting Yeonsu. He needs to be stopped. Suddenly Yeho appears behind them via teleportation. He watches Yeonsu and exclaims, is he attacking tanks? Suddenly, a member of Team Love appears behind Yeho and shouts that everyone needs to get together. We need to catch the captain of the Team Hope. With these words, he swings his arms and prepares to attack Bikiho, but suddenly he is killed by Seo Munyob's spear. Members of the love team come closer to him and shouts are heard that he needs to attack, not stand. You need to defeat him while his teleport is recharging. Suddenly, Hai Young's voice is heard and she uses a whip to pick up her father and take him to Seo Munyob. He meets Bikiho and asks how long has this old man been playing sports. Bikiho jokingly replies that he is too young. Seo Munyob then tells him to stop making him laugh. They dealt with the tanks, so now it's 3-3. The members of the love team look at them angrily. Seo Munyob then suggests that they split up into pairs. Shim Yeon-soo begins to get even angrier. The presenters immediately exclaim how cool this is. They will see players dueling. They pretended to attack Shim Yeon-soo, and they themselves removed all the tanks. Team Naja did a great job. How beautifully everything was finished. Player Seo Munyob's attacks are truly amazing. It controls impact forces and speed. They also very skillfully use their superpowers when attacking. Well, they return to the events of the battle. Player Seo Munyob sends player Bikiho flying again. A battle begins among the team members and Hai Young rushes past Shi Yeon-soo. He exclaims that this is impossible, but suddenly Seo Munyob appears behind him and asks why this is impossible. Maybe he should stop complaining already. With these words, he hits him and says that Yeon-soo is a fool. He has 3 murders to his name. At this time, the other members of Team Hope surrounded the 6 members of Team Love, who exclaimed in horror, "What? They killed 5. Ki Woo-hyun gets angry and asks when did they kill so many members. He then abruptly orders everyone to attack. If they win now, then the common victory will also be theirs. They should come to their senses by now. They are national team players." Woo-hyun then runs straight towards Choi Hyuk. He remembers Seo Munyob saying that he didn't have time, so he only explained the basics. He must constantly move and protect the left side of his body with this shield. You need to remove the shield, attack, again you need to move and defend. Defense and attack, defense and attack, did he understand? Then Gwa Choi Hyuk begins to fight. He notes to himself, he removed the shield. Thus, he was able to repel Woo-hyun's attack. He is indignant, how did this happen? When did he become a tank? Where do such good defense skills come from? He doesn't even know how to be a tank properly. Then he goes on the attack again. Choi Hyuk quickly got ready, but stumbled and fell. But fortunately, Seo Munyob, who already had 3 kills to his name, was nearby and helped him. After some time, Seo Munyob praises Choi Hyuk. He says that he is great. He should leave the rest to them. Then he suggests dealing with the opponents in 5 minutes and then moving on to the next stage. The first round ends with the victory of the Naja team with a score of 8-0, and the best player of the first round is Bikiho. After some time, exclamations of admiration are heard in the locker room of the team. Coach, that was incredible. Does he realize how tough he is? He needs to get back to the field. He would definitely be one of the top 3 players in the battle. Yi-hai embarrassedly thanked the team members for such words. At his age, it's a little awkward to get back into action, but the feeling he felt when he took up arms again for the first time in 17 years was worth it. This is all possible because Seo Munyob is nearby. At this time, he was watching a TV series called Stairway to Hell. The man on the screen shouted that love must return. Seo Munyob wondered, is he serious? After some time, the presenters announced that the second round would begin very soon, so they should look at a new location. This is a complex dungeon where rooms and stairs intertwine front and back, left and right, above and below. Wherever the player is and whatever he does, tenfold gravity falls on him. The location is called the Labyrinth of Death. Seo Munyob had already cleared this dungeon once, but before him, many superhumans died here. It will be interesting to see the first liquidator back in action. At this time, the teams were heading to the location. Shim Yeon-soo looked at Seo Munyob furiously, but he didn't answer. But I was just wondering why, after waking up, he was surrounded by so many fools. The reporters outside the hospital, that sect that worships him, and fools like that Shim Yeon-soo. Before putting on a special helmet and starting the game, Seo Munyob thinks, so they want him to show the real game. No problem. He's ready. However, everything will be much worse than they can imagine. A few moments later, Team Naja is at its starting point, that is, in the Maze of Death. Iho announces that there is a short briefing to be held. He thinks that everyone already knows that the Death Labyrinth is very complex. Suddenly, Seo Munyob interrupts him and says that he will go alone. Well, they will go on their own somehow. Bikiho wonders what. Does he still remember how the labyrinth works from the time of the raid? Seo Munyob explains, of course. Only a year has passed for him. Does he remember almost all the places he has visited, or do the dungeons change during the battle? Then Yeho realizes that these 17 years really didn't exist for him, and he replies that everything is the same here. Okay, he knows this place better than anyone, so he can go. Just no nonsense. Seo Munyob smiles slyly and tells Yeho not to worry. He's going to put on a show, so they just have to wait. If the love team starts moving parallel to them, then he knows exactly where they will be. Then he heads off. Hae-young asks his father if he is sure that Seo Munob can be released alone. Baek Yi-ho calmly answered, even if Seo Munob looks like a fool who only watches TV series, but he has enormous combat experience, and he takes the task responsibly. Most likely he already has a plan. Hae-young exclaims that this is cool. Yi-ho then asks with excitement that he has a plan. It's true. Seo Munob is already rapidly flying through the labyrinth and ends up with the skeleton warriors. The monsters notice him and he joyfully exclaims that everything is the same as in the old days. He is glad to meet you. With these words, he runs straight towards the skeletal warriors and begins to attack. The skeletons also begin to fight him. If a year has passed for him, does that mean 18 years for everyone else? Gravity increased 10 times. It will be difficult for a beginner to cope with this. However, if you adapt, you can greatly shorten the path. Thinking about this, Seo Munob makes his way through the maze straight to Team Love. The members see him and can't believe he's already here. But not even 10 minutes have passed since the start of the round. Seo Munob replied that he already understood in the first round what they would do in the second. So they are already dead. The captain of the Love team, Ki Woo-hyun, shouts to his athletes to gather and attack now. He couldn't come alone. They must divide into groups and go into battle. Seo Munob listened to this and watched as the members ran away in the other direction. He thought they were jumping to conclusions. Regrouping in this situation is not a bad idea, but he will easily kill them all anyway. Then he invites them to play. After these words, he activates his analyzing gaze and begins to scan the team members and selectively attack them. After some time, one murder appeared on his account. He thinks to himself that the participant he just killed could never have remained alive to the end. He has 51 agility. It's a pity that the spear can't be returned. But the 3 remaining are enough for him. Then he looks around and asks where has everyone gone. In this case, he will have to go upstairs. At this time, the Love team members move to another floor and shout that they need to get together. How did he find them so quickly? This ruins all their plans. Someone answers that he was still alone, which means his team is in another zone. Why shouldn't they attack him together? But the man is immediately told that perhaps his partners are simply hiding. This could be such a plan, that is, to distract and then suddenly attack. They cannot carelessly rush after him. They need to be careful. He'll probably attack again. At this time, Seo Munob stands on the edge of the platform and looks down. The presenters note that after active movements, the player Seo Munob froze and did not move. I wonder what he's up to. At this time, Seo Munob notes to himself that this place suits him. Considering the speed of the enemy team and how long they ran, they were probably hiding somewhere by now. Maybe right here. Chances are 50/50. If he doesn't check, he won't know. He then prepares his spear and, taking aim, throws it. At this moment he also shouts that Love must return. The spear flies straight down, making a lot of noise. The members of the Love team became wary when suddenly a spear flew straight at them. Ki Woo-hyun can't understand how he learned this. How did he do it? The presenter is also at a loss for words. It was simply incredible. Seo Munob already has 2 kills to his name. He sits down on the edge of the platform and was there with a smile. It was then announced that Seo Munob had 2 more kills. The presenters note that they have already said that today the most exciting match in the history of the Korean Battle of Superhumans awaits them. At this time, Shim Yeon-soo screams that he should have attacked right away. Seo Munob can defeat 1 athlete, but what if 2 athletes attack at once? No one is covering for him. They just gave him time to get ready and strike. Ki Woo-hyun orders him to calm down. But Yeon-soo doesn't calm down and continues to shout that Seo Munob continues to hunt them down while they stand still. They should split up and go exploring. Woo-hyun objects to him again. They have too few people before this. Shim Yeon-soo gets even angrier and asks if he's joking. Does he even have a plan? Meanwhile, Seo Munob watches the team members from above and wonders why they are fighting. Yeon-soo continues to be indignant that they all annoy him. It would be better if he could deal with Seo Munob using only his strength. The team members calm him down and tell him that he needs to take care of his aura. It would be better to unite and attack everyone at once. Young-soo shouts irritably that he can't do one thing, he can't do another. He then decides to attack Seo Munob himself and hits him directly with a fire attack. Shim Yeon-soo asks if he really thought he was the smartest one here. He knew that Seo Munob was lurking behind. But the fire dissipates and he appears in the same place. Yeon-soo wonders how. Seo Munob grins and asks, did he really believe that he would discover it himself? If he really wanted to hide, then no one would have noticed him. He then says that Shim Yeon-soo is not getting a role in the series. He should take courses. After these words, Seo Munob disappears. The Love team members exclaim in surprise. Shim Yeon-soo can't understand how he blocked the blow so easily. Ki Woo-hyun confirms that he was aiming straight at him. His super strength and aura are at an excellent level. He's very good for the major leagues. Why did they leave him in the position of main damage dealer? Seo Munob's attack is not at all easy to block. This cannot be left unanswered. Woo-hyun then says that Yeon-soo has to catch him. They should split into 2 groups. 6 people go hunting monsters, the rest catch Seomunyob. They will pretend to be walking in the north, and when he follows them they will catch him. Even Seomunyob will not be able to deal with the damage dealers, and thanks to the points they earn for the hunt, they will surely kill him. The MCs then note that it seems the love team has started hunting for Seomunyob. But it's unlikely to be that simple. It is the chief of the 7 saviors who knows the labyrinth of death best of all. At this time, he watches the love team, which goes to carry out the plan, and wonders, judging by their speed, they decided to play turtles. How charming. With these words, he jumps straight to the members of Team Love. The hosts again note that the player Seomunyob has already noticed the love team. He is preparing to attack 3 fighters. As soon as he lands on the ground, opponents immediately attack him. He notes that they came up with a good idea. All 3 are damage dealers. Seomunyob then points out that they are not as weak as the others. But then he swings and attacks the team members. He now has 3 kills to his name. Then, using a meter attack, he kills another participant, giving him 4 kills. He then approaches the last participant and attacks him as well. As a result, his account becomes 5 kills. Having dealt with everyone, he wondered, are there already 5 people? So there are 6 people left. Great, he'll finish them off in one go. The audience exclaims, is he really their compatriot? He destroyed 3 main damage dealers in less than a minute. It's crazy. That's speed. The presenters are also surprised. This is speed. Surely many players are looking forward to the outcome of the confrontation between a Superman with combat experience and professional players. I wonder what the result would have been in a match with Walker. Shuren looks at this and notes that Seomunyob is indeed back. He's doing well. At this time, he contacted his team and was asked, when did he manage to kill the 5? He answered with a smile and asked again, don't they like it? He already has a red aura. Then the participants cheerfully exclaim, seriously, they can join now, where is he? He answers that he is in Zone 3 alone. But by the time they arrive, he will already be finished. He then disconnects and says that he has gone to deal with the others. After a while, Seomunyob finds himself right in front of the rest of Team Love. He asks them if they were waiting for him or were they. The captain of the love team orders everyone to get ready. They must work according to plan. Seomunyob asks if they are prepared. Then the love team members surround him. Seomunyob thinks they will attack in droves. But no matter how hard they try, he will deal with everyone, starting with the person closest to him. Suddenly one of the participants runs towards him with an attack. Seomunyob notes that he has good data, agility 79 and speed 80, super strength, instant acceleration. Good abilities. This means he can improve agility to 102 and 7 and increase speed to 104. The only member of the team who can accelerate for such a long period of time. But why does he still do poorly even with this? He managed to dodge the attack. Seomunyob points out that no matter how fast he is, doesn't he think that his movements need to be calculated in advance? Immediately after these words, Seomunyob has 6 kills on his account. Team Captain Ki Woo-hyun yells at Shim Young-soo to use Fire Blast. Yeon-soo starts attacking and furiously shouts that Seomunyob is finished. At this time, Woo-hyun rushes towards him, but suddenly exclaims, where did he go? He doesn't see Seomunyob. Then another team member begins to rush into the smoke screen with a menacing scream. Suddenly, Sun Seomunyob appears from this and destroys the enemy. He has 7 murders to his name. Ki Woo-hyun can't believe it. Then Seomunyob attacks him again, and he now has 8 kills. Then he goes on the attack again and makes the 9th kill. After he has defeated his opponents, he clutches his spear in his hand and turns to Woo-hyun and Yeon-soo and asks, are they now 2 against 1? Shim Yeon-soo can't figure out what's going on. This did not happen even with French athletes. At this time, with the help of Seomunyob's analyzing gaze, he learns that Ki Woo-hyun has strength 88, agility 75, speed 70, endurance 69, willpower 79, skills 70, aura 80, super strength slow. Then he notes to himself that he has good data, but his superpower is so-so. Many people have an aura greater than 80. Seomunyob then turns to Yeon-soo and asks what kind of disrespect is this. He is standing right in front of him. He then attacks the team captain and has 10 kills to his name. After this, Seomunyob turns to Shim Young-soo and asks if he is the only one left. With these words he begins to approach him, but Young-soo screams for him not to come near him and to stop. Seomunyob doesn't listen and screams for him to die. After that, he attacks him and kills him. Seomunyob has 11 kills on his score and the hosts exclaim that this is simply incredible.